Chapter 1700. Madam, you're back. As soon as Miyu returned, a young woman wearing a water green dress walked towards her. The woman had her hair combed into a bun. Her eyes were filled with lust and her lips were curved into a smile. A bright and gentle light shone in her eyes. The woman raised her hand to help her remove the heavy things on her shoulders, looking very virtuous. This servant has already ordered someone to prepare hot water. Why don't Madam go and wash up first? Master is waiting in the room. His temper still hasn't calmed down. Miyu curled her lips in her mind. I understand. The woman brought a neatly folded set of women's clothing to Miyu, helped her wash up, and helped her dress and comb her hair. Not long later, the woman who was originally dressed as a man became a beautiful married woman. But her lips were habitually pressed down. Her eyes were silent, looking a little serious. How did Madam's test go? The woman knelt down and helped Miyu tie her belt into a bow, carefully adjusting its position and smoothing out the creases. Not bad, I have some confidence. Right, why is he here too? The woman teased. He's probably worried that Madam will really let him eat the bamboo scroll. Miyu replied, I'm not joking with him. After tidying up the room, Miku went to the main hall. Before she even entered the room, she saw a pale-faced gentleman sitting in the room. If one only looked at his appearance, the man could be considered above average. Unfortunately, he was only an embroidered pillow that looked good, but was actually useless. As soon as Miyu arrived, the man started to complain. What time is it already? Why aren't you eating yet? Miyu ignored him and sat on her mat. The water green dress woman brought her a table and set up the utensils. The man became even angrier and shouted at the woman in the green dress. You're such an idiot with poor eyesight. I'm the head of this house, as a concubine. Why are you so attentive to her? Hurry up and serve her, don't make me angry. Both of them were blind. All of his concubines were supporting this woman Miyu. They must be crazy. Before he married Miyu, there were 7 or 8 women serving him in the inner courtyard. The women who once fought for his affections, after Miyu married him, all of them seemed to have been drugged, trying their best to please Miyu. What happened to the inner courtyard fighting? He was their man, so what was the point of currying favor with Miyu? How infuriating. This time it was even more outrageous. A woman didn't stay in the inner residence, and insisted on coming out to compete with a group of men. She did not follow the ways of a woman, so the concubines in the inner courtyard were also crazy. They fought with each other to go out with her, and serve her along the way. If these concubines went to serve Michu, who would serve him? The concubine's hand froze. Mika said expressionlessly, ignore him. It was just the barking of a mad dog. There was no need to pay it any mind. The concubine smiled and said, yes. The man. Whose concubines were these? He resisted the urge to flip the table and suppressed his boiling anger. What are you looking at? Hurry up and bring it over. Do you want to starve me to death? The man was angered by Mitong, so he turned around and vented his anger on someone else. Even when the food was served, his anger still hadn't subsided. Time to eat. Saying so, the man saw that Mitong had already started eating from the corner of his eyes. He was so angry that he almost had a heart attack. He, as the head of the house, hadn't even said that he could eat yet she dared to eat first? Seeing the man's stupid look, Mitong's lips curled into a cold smile. After so many years, his brain was still so stupid. Why did all the concubines in the inner courtyard fawn over her? Did this person not know at all? Naturally, it was because there were more benefits to serving Mitong than serving men, and the work was also easier. If it wasn't for benefits, then what was it for? No woman would want to become a concubine. Becoming a concubine to fight for favor was just to obtain a stable life and good conditions from a man. Before Mitong married over, these concubines weren't treated very well. The residence was filled with chaos. Many of the concubines would fight over a few dishes, beautiful satin, or even a few caddies of charcoal for the winter. That ignorant look really made people want to laugh. After she married over, she used her methods to make these women see the reality. Men were useless. The one who could truly bring them a better life was not a man, but her, the matriarch. The concubines fought over a man's affections and worked themselves to death, But in the end, the benefits they obtained were not even as good as fawning over Mi Tong, the matriarch. There were also those who were short-sighted and didn't believe it, and ended up being taught a lesson by Mi Tong. As for the children fighting for favor, it was even more ridiculous. If Mi Tong didn't manage it, even if the concubines fought over it with their sons, they would just be an empty shell. What was there to fight over? In fact, they hoped that Mi Tong would get pregnant and have children, or have a successful career, so that they could accumulate more wealth, so that their children could have a bigger share. After all, the so-called head of the house couldn't be relied on at all. Such a simple logic, yet the man didn't understand. No wonder he was getting less and less liked by the concubines. He really was stupid. With a belly full of anger, nothing he ate tasted good. So he hurriedly ate a few mouthfuls before putting down his chopsticks. When he raised his head, he saw a concubine kneeling beside the table, using her slender hands to peel and cut crab legs for Mi Tong, causing his anger to rise. He said in a strange tone, "Did you really go to the Duke of Lanting's recruitment notice?" Mi Tong replied, "I did." The man sneered, "You weren't chased out by someone?" Mi Tong looked up at him. The look in her eyes told her to understand. Women should just stay in the inner residence to take care of their husbands and children. Don't dream about unrealistic dreams all day long. The man said, "Quite a few people already know about your matter. How do you want my friends to look at me? While you haven't lost too much face yet, quickly return with me, so that you can know your place from now on." Mi Tong sneered. If the men in the house can support the family, and are more outstanding than this concubine, why would this concubine need to stand up for them? The man's face instantly turned purple from anger. "When did I ever lack food and clothing for you? Do I need you to show your face and make a fool of yourself?" Mi Tong said, "That's funny. Longjuan's annual expenses alone cost 9,000 strings of coins. The household's womenfolk, maids, servants, and guards are fixed at 5,000 strings of coins. Father-in-law and mother-in-law's expenses are 3,500 strings of coins. And the social interaction during festivals also costs 4,300 strings of coins. However, the income of the estate's farmlands and shops is less than 10,000 strings of coins, leaving such a huge gap. Could it be that Langjun has filled in the gaps?" Before Mi Tong married, the estate's account books had been read for years, with losses reaching more than 300,000 strings of coins. Now that the losses had turned into profits, and the estate's food and clothing were getting better and better, wasn't it all because of her? You're living off a woman, yet you still don't know how to correct your attitude. You sure are shameless. The man couldn't win against her in an argument. He had no reason to refute, and if he didn't refute, he would feel suffocated. "In short, are you going back or not?" Mi Tong said calmly. "The Duke of Lanting's declaration of war will arrive in a few days. If you leave now, you won't be afraid of being questioned." "Declare war? You?" The man almost laughed. "If the Duke of Lanting declares war on you, I'll kneel and eat this table raw." Mi Tong. Chapter 1701. What's with that look? Receiving Mi Chu's understand look, the man was annoyed. Was she doubting him or looking down on him? "If it wasn't for me spoiling you, do you really think you're someone important?" This woman actually dared to roll her eyes at him. She sure had guts. If he didn't do something about it, wouldn't she be stepping on his head in the future? Mi Chu sneered coldly and slowly put down her chopsticks. She took the handkerchief from the concubine and elegantly wiped the corner of her mouth. "Since you're so confident, just wait for the bamboo scrolls to be cooked on the table. Our family isn't poor. We can still afford a bamboo scroll and a table. If the kitchen doesn't make it to your liking, this concubine will have the kitchen try a few more dishes until you're satisfied." The man almost choked on her words. The finger he pointed at Mi Chu trembled in anger. Mi Chu stood up from the mat and returned to her room without looking back. The concubine hesitated for a second before decisively following the main wife's footsteps. Dr. Mi Chu was the one who provided for her. If she didn't hug this leg, should she hug that unreliable man instead? The man was so angry that he flipped the table and cursed, but the target of his curses had already left. No matter how harsh and nasty his curses were, there were only a few servants in the audience. Not only did he not affect me Chu, he even lost his face and hurt his liver. Bitch. I'm so angry. The man slammed the table and gritted his teeth. I'll divorce this bitch sooner or later. I'll divorce her sooner or later. The servants at the side could only roll their eyes inwardly. If a man dared to divorce, he would have done so 800 years ago. Why would this couple torment each other for so many years? He couldn't understand it either. The first madam was both beautiful and talented. There was a wide market for her to remarry after a divorce. Why did she have to hang herself on this crooked tree? It wasn't just them who didn't understand. The concubines in the man's backyard didn't understand either. Michu was probably the main wife of every man's dream. She would serve the in-laws and raise their children. The entire residence would be well organized. There was no need to worry about the inner and outer courtyards. She never cared which concubine her husband slept in at night. If her husband wanted to take a concubine, she would support him. Even the money for the concubines was earned by her. Other than being tall, men didn't need to use their brains. What man wouldn't like such a virtuous wife? The only difference was that not only would this virtuous wife not flatter her husband, but she would also not be dissed by his gorgeous concubines every day. Instead, she could anger her husband so much that even his concubines would stand on her side. Speaking of which, it was very mysterious. Outsiders couldn't see through it at all. In the study, the concubine used the pair of hands that men love to use to massage Miyu's shoulders. Her strength was just right, and her technique was also very experienced. Miku was leaning against a table, flipping through a book, his brows furrowed and relaxed from time to time. The concubine couldn't help but advise. Why doesn't Madam talk to Master? Michu flipped a page and replied without even lifting her eyelids. What do I have to discuss with him? Saying too much would only anger oneself. Anger would harm the liver, and liver harm would shorten one's lifespan. For the sake of such a man's slow suicide, she was lucky. The concubine said, Old Master always makes Madam angry, and Madam is also vexed. Why don't you pacify him so that he won't disturb your studies? Miyu sneered. Is he even worthy? The concubine. Thinking back to her own master's conduct, fine, he really isn't worthy. There is one thing that this concubine doesn't understand. If Madam is willing to answer, why don't you help this concubine? Miyu said, What is it? The concubine said, Madam is talented and beautiful, and you are also young. If you divorce and remarry, you won't have to worry about not being able to find a man of your caliber. So why waste your time on Master? Madam treats us well, and we are not ungrateful. We naturally hope that Madam can be better. As for Master, he isn't all bad, but he can't compare to those young talents. How could other people have so many concubines in their backyards? Now that she was the wife of a scumbag, she had to put up with an idiot wandering around in front of her every day. Miyu's lips curled up into a faint smile. She said, To me, no one in this world can be him, so it doesn't matter who I marry. Back then, if it wasn't for her shameless relatives using extreme methods to force her to marry someone else, she planned to be a widow for the rest of her life. Since her current husband couldn't affect her no matter what he did, what difference was there between a divorce and a divorce? After so many years, she had already accepted reality and didn't want to suffer anymore. If she divorced, there was no guarantee that her so-called maternal relatives wouldn't force her to marry again for benefits. Of course, the current her wouldn't give those people the chance to harm her. The concubine knew very well who the he Miyu was talking about was. Miyu's ex-husband, who was rumored to be a gentle man. Also, there's nothing bad about him taking more concubines. Miyu's words were out of the concubine's expectations. Would there be a wife who liked her husband taking concubines? There are many beautiful things in the world, but they can't compare to beautiful women. Each and every one of them is more beautiful than flowers, beautiful and young. Just by standing there, they are already a painting. Miyu smiled. You guys always have your own skills. For example, you can always massage the shoulders and back just right. Usually, when you sit and read too much, your neck and shoulders hurt. With just a little massage, how can your days not be beautiful? Yin Yang has a yellow voice, and I like to listen to her singing in the backyard in the early morning. Her mood will be good for the whole day. Xiao Hong can dance in the sky, and her figure is beautiful. Pig trotters like beautiful and talented concubines. He spent a lot of money to redeem several of them from brothels. Me liked them too. Rather than saying that these concubines were men's, it was better to say that they were raised by Miyu. Of course, Miyu seemed to have thought of something, and her voice was filled with self-mockery. In this world, women are the most difficult. If he takes one more concubine, won't he have one more place to stay? There are pros and cons, and fortune and disaster depend on each other. It all depends on what the people involved think. No one knew that when she was young, she hated the existence of concubines the most, and she scoffed at this twisted logic. However, times had changed and the world was different. Nanxing had experienced more than 10 years of war, and there were many women who had suffered misfortune. She had seen too many naked corpses in the wilderness, their corpses covered in maggots, and the scenes of being exposed to the wind and sun. For most people, living was not easy, so they had no right to be picky about how they lived. "Madam, will the Duke of Lanting really order an expedition?" Miyu said with certainty. "Definitely he will. He needs me." The concubine smiled. "If that's the case, the old master, is he really going to eat the table of bamboo slips?" "Humph. A gentleman never goes back on his word. If he says he'll eat it, then I'll watch him kneel and finish it." Before the expedition document was issued, Jiang Pingji received a few pieces of news. Many people said that they had seen people similar to Hua Yuan. Jiang Pingji connected the dots and discovered a secret. Hua Yuan was heading north in the direction of Ningzhou. Ningzhou? Isn't that Hua Yuan's ancestral home? Chapter 1702. Lord, are you guessing that Hua Yuan has gone to Ning province? Jiang Pingji secretly summoned Wei Xi and told him about Hua Yuan. Jiang Pingji said, "That's what I guessed. If I remember correctly, you said that Hua Yuan died of illness in Ningzhou in his previous life?" "Indeed, but in this life. I didn't expect Hua Yuan to end up the same way. If it weren't for this encounter in his childhood, Hua Yuan wouldn't have lost his mind, and he wouldn't have lived his life like this. If he was clear-headed, it wouldn't be difficult for him to live to the end of his life, even if he didn't achieve success and recognition. How does my lord intend to deal with him? Should we send someone to capture him, or kill him on the spot?" Wei Xi felt sorry for Hua Yuan, but he did not sympathize with him. After all, no matter how pitiful Hua Yuan was, his wrongdoings could not be forgiven. Jiang Pingji crossed her arms and supported her chin. She looked up at Wei Xi. "I'm going to see him in person to settle this once and for all. Zixiao, do you want to come with me?" Even if the personality created by Hua Yuan was fake, she would still feel uncomfortable if she didn't deal with it herself. After fighting the war for 2 to 3 years, she and Zixiao didn't have much time to be alone, so they could take this opportunity to spend some time together. Wei Xi smiled and said, "You lied to them at the critical moment. If you don't give a reason, I'm afraid they'll complain again." He was especially worried that Feng Zhen and the rest would misunderstand that his lord was abusing his position for personal gain. Jiang Pingji said nonchalantly, "The war in Nanxing has stopped, but there are still civil unrest of varying sizes in various places. It will take some time to completely pacify them. As the lord, how can I sit back and do nothing? In order to ensure the safety of the people, these vermin must be eradicated without delay." Was she someone who abused her position for personal gain? She was clearly doing this for the sake of the general situation and the people. She wanted to deal with the hidden danger of Hua Yuan and bring peace and stability to the people along the way. No matter how many times he heard or watched it, Wei Xi could not help but sigh at his lord's ability to lie through her teeth. No one could compare to her. "I'll have to trouble my lord to say these words to Zishur and the rest. I won't overstep my boundaries." Jiang Pingji rested her chin on her hand. Zixiao has also learned to be naughty. Who has led him astray? In the past, Zixiao was a considerate person. He wouldn't be so mischievous. Wei Xi blinked his right eye lightly and teased. "What does my lord think?" Jiang Pingji said, "I thought this is called husband and wife." As time went by, the two of them would become more and more similar in some areas, and more tacit with each other. Wei Xi was so angry that his face turned red. Tinwei Zixiao's could not compare to Wan Jiangpingji's level of flirting. The latter's level of flirting had reached the peak. As expected, Feng Zhen and the others rolled their eyes at Jiang Pengji's suggestion. On the surface he was smiling, but in his heart, he was cursing. What's the point of bringing Zixiao along for work? What's the point? Jiang Pengji raised her eyebrows and smiled. I don't mean much. I can't create the young lord that all of you yearn for by myself, can I? Feng Zhen had a meaningful look in his eyes. He raised his hand to remove Jiang Pengji's hand from his shoulder. While pretending to be serious, he suppressed the corners of his mouth and said righteously, My lord is right. Quelling the civil unrest and restoring peace to the people is the top priority. Zixiao is steady and meticulous in his work. With him by my lord's side to assist me, I can be at ease. No matter how big the world was, it was not as big as the young master. When the young lord grew up, he wouldn't have to put up with a lord with a terrible temper. Just thinking about it made him happy. He had rolled his eyes just now. But now he was eager for Jiang Pengji to immediately pack up and abduct Wei Ci. Haha men. Ningxia wasn't too far from Jiang Pengji's current location, but it wasn't near either. It would take a few days to catch up on horseback. Just as she was about to leave, an unexpected companion interrupted. What are you doing here? Jiang Pengji looked at Lu Zheng with dissatisfaction. Was this guy trying to mess things up on purpose? Lu Zheng said. I heard that the Duke of Lanting is going to look for Hua Yuan. I have some accumulated grievances with him, so I can take this opportunity to settle them. Jiang Pengji was about to refuse, but she didn't expect Wei Ci to plead for Lu Zheng with his eyes. How infuriating. You even have to bring along 2 high-wattage light bulbs. Although she was reluctant, she still brought Lu Zheng and his adopted daughter Kang Xintong. 2 days before the departure, the first batch of names for the conquest was released. The first one was impressively Mi Chu. Mi Chu. One could tell from her name that she was a woman. In fact, she was indeed a woman. The faces of the scholars who lined up behind her darkened. Even if they were roaring in their hearts that there was something shady and unfair, they still acted reservedly and congratulated each other on the surface. It was a harmonious scene. The documents for the conquest were specially sent to the temporary lodgings of the scholars. When the congratulatory sound of the gong spread from the alley to the manor, Mi Chu was standing in the courtyard and looking at the clouds in the distance. The concubine who was holding an umbrella for her to shade her from the sun asked in confusion, Why is it so noisy outside? I don't think it's noisy. Instead, it's very pleasant. Mi Chu said meaningfully. Tell the kitchen to prepare it. Madam, we just had lunch a quarter of an hour ago. Mi Chu said. The bamboo stir-fried table was prepared for the master. The concubine was stunned for a moment before she reacted. She immediately smiled and congratulated Mi Chu. On that day, the one who felt the most despair was probably Mi Chu's husband. When the good news of the conquest came, it was as if he heard the sound of a death knell. The words "my life is over" were circling in his mind. I won't eat it. I won't eat it even if I die. He would rather kneel to death than eat it. After all, they had been husband and wife for several years. He knew that Mi Chu's personality was the most serious. If she said that she wanted to eat the bamboo stir-fried table, she would definitely stuff it down his throat. Master, before the madam remembers it, let's escape first, shall we? The attendant suggested to his master with a bitter expression. After a while, the madam might forget about it. If we stay here any longer, the madam might come. Of the 36 stratagems, escape was the best. The man hurriedly packed his luggage and escaped with his guards. For a long time, he didn't dare to appear in front of Mi Chu. Mi Chu held a plate of bamboo stir-fried fungus in one hand. Looking at the messy room, she sneered without saying a word. He really can't be helped. Let him be. After this incident, he should be able to rest for a while. The concubine watched from the side with cold sweat dripping down her back. Once again, she was impressed by her madam's strength. Anyone with half a brain would know that it was impossible to eat the bamboo stir-fried table. Yet her master took it seriously. Not only did he take it seriously, he even ran away in fear. The news of Mi Chu being at the top of the list flew out, as if it had grown wings. Letting a madam rank above me is a great humiliation. Who was Mi Chu? A madam in the inner chamber. He had studied hard for more than 20 years. How could he be inferior to a madam? There must be a conspiracy behind this. The 21st ranked scholar was unhappy. He had a strong and unyielding character. He refused to admit defeat, and refused to be conscripted. The onlookers were dumbfounded as they watched the scholar stomp his feet. Then, they watched in bewilderment as the messenger put the document of conscription into his arms, and turned to leave. The scholar was speechless. He left just like that? Wasn't he going to ask him to stay? Isn't the Duke of Lanting a woman too? A spectator whispered. It was not like the scholar didn't know that Jiang Pingji was a woman. If he couldn't stand a woman being ranked above him, why did he run to the assessment? Chapter 1703. Sigh, a grown girl can't be kept at home. If she stays, she'll become enemies. I can understand the bitterness of this saying. Lu Zheng looked at his adopted daughter's back as she hurried up and down. He spoke with a tinge of jealousy and sourness. Jiang Pingji glanced at him and said, "You're the teacher's student. How can you use these words so casually?" She made it sound like she was a scumbag who had stolen Lu Zheng's sweet, cotton-padded jacket. Lu Zheng snorted coldly and said, "Ever since she saw you, she hasn't had any appetite. It's as if she's lovesick. Now she's serving you attentively. Her vigor makes people envious. Even her father has been forgotten. Tell me, where did I use the wrong context? I've doted on her for nothing. It's fine that you harmed a noble lady in Langye County, but you won't even let off a junior. Does your family Zixiao know?" Jiang Pingji pouted and said, "He's right here. He's not deaf or blind. Of course he knows." Wei Ci, who was innocently implicated in the flames of war, could only smile awkwardly but politely. The journey to Ning province this time was not far, but it was not close either. Considering that the two scholars, Wei Ci and Lu Zheng, as well as the little girl Kang Xintong, were accompanying them, Jiang Pingji ordered people to prepare a few more carriages. There were more than 1,000 entourage accompanying them. Everything was light. It was true that she was going to see Hua Yuan, but it was also true that she was going to pacify a small area of civil unrest along the way. It was impractical to bring only a few dozen people, not to mention whether Feng Zhen and the others would agree. Wei Ci alone would be difficult to pass. Not long after they left the city, Jiang Pingji became a little impatient. She invited Lu Zheng and the others to play chess and chat. Wei Ci wouldn't reject Jiang Pingji's suggestion, but Lu Zheng was different. He rejected the invitation. It was impossible to play chess. It would never be possible to play chess. If Jiang Pingji pressed him against the chessboard in front of his adopted daughter, would he still have any dignity as a godfather? His mental preparation was ultimately ruined by his adopted daughter's sparkling eyes. "Sigh, daughter, you have the opportunity to be close to your idol, but do you know how your old father will be ravaged? How could he have a chance to turn things around when this couple teamed up to bully him? It was impossible for him to turn over. He could only lie flat on the ground and let himself be rubbed against. Only then could he live." Sigh. Lu Zheng looked at the chess game that he could no longer save. He threw the chess piece back with a thud and said, "Until today, I still can't figure out how such a devoted and loyal person like Zixiao could fall in the hands of a person with the style of a prodigal son." Jiang Pingji smiled. "Do you know what human nature is, Xiaoyin?" Lu Zheng didn't understand and couldn't help asking with his eyes. "It's human nature to repeat and repeat. You say the same thing every time you see me. Even if you're not sick of it, I'm sick of it. Zixiao is your shitty, not your daughter. You're like an old father whose daughter has been snatched away. As soon as you see your son-in-law, you grab hold of him and repeatedly warn him, grieving over and over again. Sigh, God, please open your eyes and let you only have a son in this life. If you give birth to a daughter, when your daughter marries, wouldn't it be equivalent to digging out your heart? You don't know how sad you would be." Lu Zheng. This curse was too vicious. Lu Zheng was a little regretful at this moment. Why did he follow her? Jiang Pingji seemed to have taken the wrong medicine. She attacked him accurately every few days, so much so that Lu Zheng began to doubt his life. At the thought of having to face such a lord for the rest of his life, Lu Zheng suddenly felt that his life was gloomy, and he couldn't see a trace of light. Wei Si couldn't help but say a few good words for Lu Zheng. Jiang Pingji wrapped her arms around his neck and laughed softly. Her warm breath hit the sensitive part of his neck. Even if he wasn't embarrassed, it was difficult for him to restrain his physiological reaction. His ears were automatically dyed a translucent blood red, making his skin look even more delicate and fair. He raised his hands to hold Jiang Pingji's armpits to prevent her from sliding down. At this moment, his mood was like the spring breeze in March gently caressing the willow branches. His heart almost melted into water. Who asked Shoyin to be so insensible? It's rare for me to have the opportunity to travel with you, but the father and daughter just had to join us. It's inconvenient for some things. Jiang Pingji gritted her teeth when she thought of this. She stretched her legs and stepped on the hem of Wei Si's clothes. Her feet without socks looked even whiter against the layers of stone-colored clothes. Wei Si's eyes darkened slightly when he saw this. He groped around with his right hand, grabbed the scattered socks, and put them back on for her. Jiang Pingji said, "You too. You don't know what's good for you." Even though Jiang Pingji didn't think it was a big deal to run around in a bikini, for the people of this era, a naked arm and a leg were considered private parts. For those scholars who were introverted on the inside, the lethality of having a pair of feet was even greater than being naked. Wei Si's nose turned red from her teasing. He pursed his lips, put the socks on for her, and tied the straps. "Sit properly." Jiang Pingji curled her lips and moved to sit not far from him. Wei Si secretly heaved a sigh of relief. In both his previous lives, he had been a restrained and polite person. In his memory, the matter between a man and a woman should happen at night, and the location should be limited to the room. Even if they flirted during the day, they should only be around each other. What about now? There were indeed only the two of them in the carriage, but there were other people outside. Even though Wei Si had cultivated for 2 lifetimes, his skin was still not thick enough to support him to do things that were out of line. Jiang Pingji looked at Wei Si's red earlobes and the thin layer of sweat on the tip of his nose. She couldn't help but smile. In all honesty, she really didn't have the intention to be a beast. Didn't he see that she still had the streaming room open? Even if she wanted to do something to Wei Si, she would first close the streaming room. I heard that men who are introverted on the inside all have a characteristic. After they are introverted, they will be out of control. Why can't this be applied to you? Jiang Pingji shook her head regretfully. She put her feet on Wei Si's thighs. "I'm waiting for you to take the initiative." "Nonsense. It's really rude to tease a gentleman like this." Wei Si took a deep breath and silently recited the Qingxin mantra in his heart. He lowered his eyelids and continued to flip through the unfinished book. He was obsessed with reading, unable to extricate himself. He stayed away from beauties and became a saint. Jiang Pingji wouldn't give him the chance to do so. She was bored and used her toes to clamp the silk ribbon that hung on his waist. She listened to the jade ornaments clinking against each other. The sound wasn't loud. It was far from the sound of rolling wheels. However, Wei Si's ears could only hear the crisp sound of the jade ornaments clinking against each other. His eyes couldn't help but move from the black and white words to the instep of her feet. He was very impatient. Jiang Pingji supported her chin with one hand on the table. Her body was half lying on the cushion of the carriage. Her eyes slid past Wei Si's fingers. The diamond ring was still on his finger. It was still as shiny as before after years of pulling it out. She smiled and said, "Zixiao, do you still remember the day I gave you the diamond ring?" Wei Si couldn't help but recall. All kinds of discordant scenes floated past his eyes. Not long after, he was so embarrassed that he blushed. The fire in his heart burned and made him feel uncomfortable. If he couldn't suppress the Qingxin mantra once, he would recite it again. Wei Si didn't dare to look at her. Chapter 1704. Get a new batch? These words played in Wei Si's mind over and over again. His previously calm expression turned into one of embarrassment. Both of them were well aware of what to get. Jiang Pingji could say it openly, but Wei Si, who was a serious person, found it difficult to say it. Nonsense. Wei Si forced himself to calm down and scolded her in an embarrassed voice. It was as if he was afraid that the walls had ears and could hear their private conversation. It's improper to have sex in broad daylight. Be more serious, don't let others see. After saying that, he raised his hand and put the book aside. With his sharp eyes, he saw that Jiang Pingji had taken off the socks that she had just put on. He grabbed the socks with one hand and grabbed her swaying feet with the other, putting them back on with a serious face. This time it was a dead knot. Let's see how she can get rid of it. Wei Zixiao, you're really hopeless. Jiang Pingji saw that he was still pretending to be a gentleman. She wailed and leaned back. She kicked his thigh with the tip of her foot to vent her anger. Of course, Wei Xi was a real porcelain beauty. She did not dare to use too much strength, lest she accidentally cripple him. Rather than saying that she was venting her anger, it was better to say that she was provoking him, or scratching an itch through one's boot. The salted fishes could not stand it anymore. Although Jiang Pingji had a sense of propriety, and her actions were not excessive in the salted fish dimension, considering Wei Xi's identity, the salted fishes could not help but break out in cold sweat for him. Killing someone was just a matter of nodding one's head to the ground. Jiang Pingji's method of torturing Wei Xi was to make him suffer a fate worse than death. Tudafeiqiu. Zixiao is unlucky to meet the streamer. How can a man with high moral standards withstand such provocation? Yi Manqing Mao. This is probably Liu Xiaohui. I feel sorry for Zixiao just by looking at him. Canteen Daffin Auntie. Beauty Ci used his strength to tell everyone that he is a man with integrity. Indeed, he did not move an inch. Everyone was an adult. Some things were tacit. Not to mention that most of the people in the streaming room were experienced drivers. Each one was dirtier than the other. They dared to guarantee with their integrity that these idle fishes were definitely looking for traces of the small tent. Jiyuan Buyuan. Staring at the crotch of a cat, not moving at all. Uft, the ancient gods' attainments in Chinese are indeed beyond our reach. You guys are so dirty that it's scary. The host is so petty and easily jealous. Aren't you afraid that she'll close the live broadcast room out of jealousy? What was a jinx? This was probably a jinx. Just as this salted fish finished speaking, the livestream screen went black. Jiang Pingji used her strength to demonstrate how petty and jealous she was. Those who coveted her were not afraid of being served by the god-slaying sword. After walking for a while, they arrived at a slightly run-down relay station before the sun set. Because of the war, this relay station had been abandoned for almost half a year, but it was still habitable after some cleaning. Jiang Pingji used a clumsy excuse that there was only one room in the post station to let Lu Zheng and Kong Xintong sleep in the carriage, which baffled them. There was only one room in the relay station? Did she come up with such a clumsy excuse with her toes? However, the situation was stronger than he was. Lu Zheng could only swallow 10,000 curses in his heart, not to mention how aggrieved he was. People in ancient times did not have much entertainment. Once the sky turned dark, they would wash up and sleep. The rich could still light a candle and sleep later. Jiang Pingji was not a poor person. Lu Zheng had pledged allegiance to her, so he would not be unable to even light a candle. Thus, he lit a lamp and read for a while. At the same time, he checked on Kong Xintong's learning situation for the day. As a strict godfather, he was very strict with his child's education. After a day's journey, the carriage was also bumpy. Kong Xintong was naturally very tired, but she still forced herself to take the test and prepare for the next day's lessons. After burning 2 oil lamps, Lu Zheng saw that Kong Xintong could not take it anymore, so he sent her back to her carriage to sleep. Lu Zheng was an adult, so he was more energetic than a child. He was not sleepy yet. He wanted to find Wei Xi for a chat, but he realized that Wei Xi was not in his carriage. Lu Zheng. Where did Wei Zixiao go? He asked a few retainers who were on night watch. Some shook their heads and said they did not know, while others said that Wei Xi had just left. Lu Zheng's first reaction was that something had happened to Wei Xi. Then he thought of another possibility. He looked in the direction of the relay station, and his face was as colorful as an overturned seasoning plate. Wei Xi was really in trouble. His chastity had been lost. After all, he was an adult. It was normal for him to have time to do interesting things. However, Lu Zheng felt awkward when he thought of their relationship. Unmarried, Lu Lanting is still as shameless as ever. She has even led Zixiao astray. That was what he said. But when he thought of the future young lord, he could only pinch his nose and bear with it. When the future young master was able to hold his own, he would immediately kick this unreliable big pig trotter away. Unfortunately, Lu Zheng's plan could not be achieved in a short period of time. In the pitch-black room, one could not see their own fingers. Only the sound of a kitten's panting could be heard. It sounded like there were two people. When the moon was in the middle of the sky, the intermittent noises gradually died down. Not long after, a woman's slightly hoarse laughter could be heard. Didn't Zixiao say that he dared not overstep his boundaries? Wei Xi's heated brain cooled down, and his rationality returned. As he recalled the previous scene, the temperature of his cheeks soared. Jiang Pingji said, "You are allowed to overstep your boundaries in this matter. After all, it requires two people to cooperate. We can do more research." Since she said that, Wei Xi could not continue pretending to be deaf and mute. What if outsiders know about this? How can outsiders know about the pleasures of the bedroom? If you are worried about this, then so be it. We might as well cut our hair. One will become a monk, and the other will become a bhikkhuni. We'll cut off our 7 emotions and 6 desires. Since we can't cut off our emotions, we'll be content with our lot, and be a secular man and woman. Jiang Pingji said, "I feel that I was not restrained just now. I can better understand what the ancestors said about being like a fish in water. How boring is it to be the same? Innovation is the true principle." Jiang Pingji tried hard to turn Wei Xi onto the wrong path of being a beast in human clothing. But Wei Xi had too much integrity. Her efforts were minimal. "You're speaking nonsense." Fine. If you say it's nonsense, then it's nonsense." Her bare arms, which were covered in a thin layer of sweat, nimbly circled around his neck. Jiang Pingji took something out of nowhere and dangled it in front of his eyes. The corners of her lips curled up. She smiled like a man-eating female demon, at least in Wei Xi's eyes. "The night is long and I can't sleep. Zixiao, can you go to Baiyun village?" They fooled around for a long time. It was not until the second half of the night that they fell asleep in each other's arms. The young master that Lu Zheng and the others had been thinking about for a long time was thrown to the ground by Jiang Pingji mercilessly. Tomorrow, they would be burned together, and their corpses would be destroyed. It was really so. Chapter 1705. Are you scared? Jiang Pingji sat by the stream and washed her hands. She wiped the god-slaying sword and its scabbard, washing away the bloodstains on them. When she lowered her head to wash her hands, she noticed that Lu Zheng's adopted daughter was looking at her. Jiang Pingji smiled and waved at her, calling her over. Kang Xintong seemed to have woken up from a dream. She seemed to have thought of something. She walked forward with a blushing face and bowed respectfully. "I'm not scared." Kang Xintong nodded heavily to make sure that she was not scared. Jiang Pingji used her slightly wet hand to stroke the top of her head. Her movement was not heavy, but it felt heavy and powerful. Even through the hair, one could feel the gentleness from her palm. Kang Xintong did not dare to move, but the blush on her face deepened. "I'm scared. I saw that your face was whiter than the white clouds in the sky. Fear is not a shameful emotion, not to mention that you're still a child." Jiang Pingji let Kang Xintong sit beside her. The little girl sat on one side reservedly, her eyes darting around. Kang Xintong said, "I'm really scared, but Master Lanting is here. I'm not afraid of anything." Jiang Pingji looked at the undisguised adoration and joy in her eyes. She could not help but smile. Well, if Xiaoyin knew, he would be furious. The daughter he raised with so much effort was stolen by me. Jiang Pingji shook off the water on her hands, wiped the water off the god-slaying sword with a handkerchief, and put it back into the scabbard. Kang Xintong said, "My adoptive father admires Master Lanting very much. He speaks highly of you in private." Jiang Pingji could not help but laugh. "Little girl, Lu Zheng will cry if he hears this." Thinking of the Red Lotus Saint girl that Wei Xi mentioned, Jiang Pingji felt that the little girl in front of her was cuter. There were countless possibilities in life. She hoped that Kang Xintong's path would lead to happiness. "Master Lanting." Jiang Pingji responded and gestured for Kang Xintong to continue. Kang Xintong took a deep breath and said with a blushing face, Do I have the talent to learn martial arts? Didn't you learn literature from your adoptive father? I heard him mention that you seem to have a grand ambition to compete with the world's scholars. One can't multitask. No matter how talented you are, you might not be able to achieve your goal if you share some of it with other areas. Kang Shintong said. This servant can sleep 2 hours less every day. Nonsense. You're still growing at such a young age. If you sleep less than 2 hours, you won't be able to grow taller. Kang Shintong lowered her head dejectedly and stared at the wooden clogs on her feet. Why do you want to learn martial arts? Jiang Pingji was more patient with her children, and Kang Shintong was no exception. I'm afraid that even a divine general can't compare to your heroic bearing just now. I'm very pleased. The passionate confession did not have a trace of the muddy color of the adult world. It was pure and passionate. Without waiting for Jiang Pingji to react, salted fish in the streaming room started jeering. Guikai guo fengxiao. In this live streaming room that sells dog meat, you can watch any of your cute scenes except for the harem fights. Whether it was the gay love between two men, the passion between a man and a woman, or the love between a woman and a woman, there were many kinds of explosive news, and you could choose from them. It's not that I want to criticize you, but can you control your hormones? Don't mess with children. The Lord of Destiny. I don't believe that this is a proper streaming room anymore. And the host is even more so not a proper host, Xiaoshe Wushuang. Spending all my money to buy a new batch of CP shares. Even though it's bound to be a loss, I won't regret it. Jiang Pingji laughed and said, just because of this reason? Even though her goal was Hua Yuan, it was also true that she wanted to eradicate the civil unrest along the way. Nanxing was a vast territory. Jiang Pingji's army had conquered the whole of Nanxing in name, but there were still many places that were uninformed that were occupied by rebels and bandits. The local people were being bullied. She had just defeated a group of more than 1,000 rebels. The rebels were a group of unorganized and undisciplined mobs, so she got rid of them quickly and easily. However, there was not much difference in the number of people on both sides, so a wave of bandits rushed in. Jiang Pingji could only clean them up along the way. Coincidentally, this scene fell into Kang Shintong's eyes. She did not know what the girl was thinking, but she came over to tell her that she wanted to learn martial arts. Kang Shintong blinked, her eyes filled with determination. I also want to wield a knife and a sword. If an accident happens, I will at least be able to protect myself. Her foster father could draw his sword, but she was a burden. She had no other choice but to hide in the carriage. What she could not accept was not the corpses of the rebels. It was not facing death directly, but facing death without any ability to resist. Jiang Pingji said, if you want to learn, get your foster father to hire a martial arts master for you. Kang Shintong said, a martial arts master? It's best if it's a retired martial arts master from the women's battalion. The killing methods they learn are more suitable for women to study. Kang Shintong nodded, but a sense of disappointment flashed in her eyes. Jiang Pingji said, the methods that the women's battalion soldiers learn are all passed down by me. When Kang Shintong heard this, her eyes lit up again. She smiled and revealed a pair of small dimples. When Lu Zheng heard that Kang Shintong wanted to learn martial arts, he frowned, as if he did not agree. If she wanted to learn something else without learning it well, wouldn't she achieve nothing? It's good that she learns it. It's impossible for her to be alone forever, and she won't always be safe from danger. It's always good to have some life-saving methods. Lu Zheng sighed and tacitly agreed to it. It just so happened that there were women's battalion soldiers accompanying them. They could help Kang Shintong build her foundation. When they arrived in Ningzhou, they killed countless rebels and bandits along the way. Jiang Pingji drank some water to moisten her lips. She sent someone to Hua Yuan's old house and the vicinity of the tribe's land to find out if there were any similar people. Her luck was better. The trip was not in vain. There were indeed people who saw people who looked like Hua Yuan. Let's go and take a look tomorrow. It was the time when the seasons changed. The weather was getting colder day by day. There was even a light drizzle in the morning. Lu Zheng asked Kang Shintong to wait at the courier station. They went out together, bringing only 4 guards with them to ensure their safety. Jiang Pengji and the rest changed into inconspicuous clothes and went to the residence of the lunatic according to the villagers. Although it was called a residence, it was actually an abandoned rundown temple. It did not block the wind or the rain. Thinking of the wind last night, the rain this morning, and Hua Yuan's current state, Wei Ci was mentally prepared. After all, he had the experience from his previous life. Jiang Pengji and Lu Zheng were also mentally prepared. But after all, they did not see it with their own eyes. Reality and imagination were different. It's quiet here. As they walked up the rugged mountain road, they could vaguely see wisps of smoke halfway up the mountain. There was a small village with less than 30 households there. As they walked closer, they could see the shadows of people walking around. Not far from the village was a rundown temple. From afar, Jiang Pengji could hear the children's laughter, as well as the low roars of beasts. The more the beast roared and struggled, the more innocent the children laughed. Chapter 1706. Jia, let's go. You've ridden enough. Now it's my turn. Why isn't this lunatic walking anymore? I won't give you anything to eat if you don't. Crawl. As they got closer, even Wei Ci and the other commoners could hear the commotion in the dilapidated temple. A few children seemed to be arguing about something. Salted fish in the streaming room had a vague feeling that a storm was brewing. There were fewer bullet screens on the screen, and only 1 or 2 lines occasionally floated by. Jiang Pengji said in a low voice, "Let's go." Lu Zheng vaguely guessed something. His originally brisk footsteps suddenly became heavy, and some hesitation flashed across his face. As they got closer to the dilapidated temple, everyone could see what was happening through the cracked walls of the temple. Jiang Pengji's face suddenly darkened. Among them, only Wei Ci remained calm, because in his previous life, he saw a completely unfamiliar Hua Yuan at the same place, at a different time, in the same dilapidated temple. When he found Hua Yuan in his previous life, he was completely crazy. The children in the nearby villages teased him and rode him like a beast. If they were happy, they would tease him. If they were unhappy, they would hit him with stones. They played a game of heroes killing ferocious beasts. The children played the heroes, and Hua Yuan was the ferocious beast that they killed. These children were naturally evil. When they were naughty, they would put their urine and feces in broken pottery bowls and tease Hua Yuan to drink or eat. Rotten eggs, dead rats, cockroaches, bedbugs, stones, and even pig and dog feces were the children's tools for pranks. Hua Yuan, who was teased by them, would only laugh foolishly. If he was bullied, he would only whine helplessly like a cub and struggle meaninglessly. Even though Wei Ci had a grudge against Hua Yuan in his previous life, he could not help but soften when he saw this scene. He used to be a person who stirred up a storm, but now he ended up like this. He did not want to lose his mind, and all his evil deeds went against his conscience. He was like a puppet controlled by others all his life, and he had no control over himself. He did not know how the real Hua Yuan would feel when he woke up and saw himself in such a pathetic state. Wei Ci had once softened and tried to take care of Hua Yuan. On the second day, he received news that Hua Yuan had died in front of his deceased parents' graves. Perhaps death was the true release. He never thought that a similar scene would play out before his eyes for the second time. "What are you doing?" Jiang Pengji strode into the dilapidated temple. The 5 children of different ages were startled. They saw a few nobles in clean clothes standing outside the dilapidated temple. They could tell at a glance that they were not ordinary people. The one in front was very scary. They screamed and wanted to escape. One of them was riding on a beggar with unkempt hair and a dirty face. His legs were short and he couldn't move fast. When he turned over, he was so scared that he fell down. If it were anyone else, they probably wouldn't bother with a few children. Jiang Pengji was different. The child who escaped quickly was caught by the servants. The chubby boy bumped into her, and she lifted him up by the collar. Children were the most sensitive. They could sense Jiang Pengji's aura more clearly. That was why Jiang Pengji liked children, but they didn't like her very much. The chubby boy's reaction was even more realistic. He didn't know how to struggle after being caught. He was so scared that he kept crying. 2 streams of tears rolled down his face, and milky white mucus flowed down his dirty nostrils and into his mouth. Lu Zheng's eyelids twitched. He was worried that Jiang Pingji wouldn't control her strength and pinch the children to death. The other children were caught by the servants. One of them was still naked. Judging from his previous actions, he had just peed on the beggar in the dilapidated temple. It was true that Jiang Pingji liked children, but she didn't like the kind that disgusted her. Beat them up and teach them a lesson. If their parents can't teach them well, don't blame others for teaching them. The servants did as they were told, but they controlled their strength. They only beat them until they cried, but they wouldn't hurt their muscles or bones. Their movements alarmed the villagers nearby. One by one, they came over with a hoe, trying to get Jiang Pingji to release the children. Seeing the clothes and the swords hanging on their waists, the villagers were terrified again. Jiang Pingji didn't do anything to the villagers. She just let them take the children back, so they could discipline them. If these little bastards were older. Jiang Pingji snorted. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was full of killing intent. Hua Yuan felt like he had a long and terrible nightmare. The scenes were intermittent. He could see clearly, but he couldn't control his body. He couldn't wake up. That was until a terrifying aura approached him, and the ice-cold touch made him quiver. His muddled mind suddenly became clear. Hua Yuan's face was blank for a moment. After a while he looked like he was about to cry, or maybe he couldn't cry anymore. Hua Yuan. An unfamiliar female voice came to his ears. Hua Yuan raised his head and looked. He was in a trance. This person, Master Lanting? Even though they had only met once many years ago, Jiang Pingji was a woman with a unique charm. It was hard to forget. Even though they hadn't seen each other for many years, he could still recognize her. Behind Jiang Pingji, Lu Zheng's face was full of disbelief. He didn't expect the dirty, ragged beggar in front of him to be Hua Yuan. His right foot seemed to be broken. The wound on his ankle had been soaked in the muddy puddle of the dilapidated temple, and was rotting. Jiang Pingji said, "Yes." Hua Yuan looked a little uneasy. He smiled bitterly and said, "I'm sorry to have let you see such an indecent scene." Jiang Pingji asked, "Have you regained your senses?" Hua Yuan sighed and said, "The illness of insanity will only end when one dies. I'm still clear-minded for a moment, but I might go crazy again after a while." He didn't seem surprised by his situation. His cloudy eyes also became clear. There was relief in his eyes, and some of his former elegance could be seen. "You know why I'm here?" Hua Yuan said calmly. "I can guess a little, but I still have some regrets. I hope you can help me." His wish was not excessive. He just wanted to freshen up by the stream, change into a clean set of clothes, and pay his respects in front of his parents' grave. Jiang Pingji asked the servant to give him an extra set of clothes. After washing up, Hua Yuan was no longer in a sorry state, but he looked more than 10 years older than before. His hair was mostly white. Lu Zheng said to Wei Xiai in a low voice, "Look at him. He can't even say half a word about the speech he prepared." No matter how much he hated Hua Yuan, he had to admit that Hua Yuan was quite a character. He could stir up trouble not long ago, but now Wei Xiai asked him, "Your heart has softened?" Lu Zheng said, "What's the point of being calculative with a lunatic who's always acting crazy? I don't even have the energy to think about it." "Your heart has softened, but he wants to die." Lu Zheng was stunned. Chapter 1707. Hua Yuan supported himself with a tree branch and limped up the mountain. His crippled leg could only drag on the ground. Because the mountain road was rugged and difficult to walk on, he was so tired that his forehead was sweating and his chapped lips curled up. Lu Zheng glanced at him and couldn't bear to look away. Outsiders felt sorry for him, but Hua Yuan seemed to have lost his sense of pain. There was no expression of pain on his face, but some relief and urgency. The closer he got to his destination, the more urgent his steps became. He even hopped on one leg for the last few steps. No one made a sound, but one of the squires accidentally stepped on something while walking, making a cracking sound. Hearing the movement, Jiang Pingji turned her head and glanced at it. She found that the squire had stepped on a piece of dirty human bone buried in the mud. Hua Yuan wasn't surprised. He turned around and walked over. He squatted down and picked up the bone that the squire had stepped on. His expression was somewhat absent-minded. He sighed and said, "After the disaster of Nanman, everyone felt insecure and uneasy. Our clansmen had to move away to avoid the disaster. Only a few loyal servants stayed behind to take care of the ancestral house and guard the clan's graves to prevent the people nearby from going up the mountain to dig up the graves." He said it calmly, but the others reacted differently. Lu Zheng looked down and Jiang Pingji was expressionless. Lu Zheng secretly observed Jiang Pingji from the corner of his eyes. Jiang Pingji had done this many times. There were many gold-rating officers under her command. When she fought with Yin Shui previously, she relied on this method to alleviate the shortage of rations. Because of this, she angered the Nanxing aristocrats in Fan province and other places. The Nanxing family rebelled and was finally wiped out by her. Yu Wufingqi. Ha ha ha, Lu Zheng's eyesight is amazing. Lovers Zicheng Xiaomei. I really want to stuff the microphone into the streamer's mouth and interview her about her current mood. Ring Kong Hong. There's no need for an interview. I bet on the streamer's integrity. She must be smiling on the outside but cursing in her heart. Jin Tian jigging. It seems that the streamer has dug up more graves than Boss Chow. Do you know about gold-rating officers? Jiang Pingji was a model worker among the streamers. She had been in the wind and rain for so many years. She was occasionally delayed, but she was never absent. The salted fishes had practically watched her grow from the age of 12 to the present. They had witnessed her development and growth for more than 10 years, so they knew her inside out. When she gave the order to dig up the graves to replenish the military supplies, many of the salted fish expressed their opposition, but most of them chose to remain silent. It wasn't that the salted fish were cold and heartless. It was just that their rationality told them that Jiang Pingji's behavior was not wrong in the context of her era. As spectators, all they could do was send bullet screens to watch the show. They could not control Jiang Pingji's life. Things had changed with the passage of time. Now that this matter was brought up again, the salted fishes could only laugh and laugh. Hua Yuan didn't seem to notice the awkwardness in the atmosphere. He continued to speak in a hoarse voice. There are a few villages on the mountain, and at the foot of the mountain. In the villages, there are often hooligans who don't work in production, but do some shady business. They sneak up the mountain to dig robbers' holes, and steal the funerary items from the tombs to sell. If that was all, then it was fine. If the dead can be buried with the living, it can be considered as accumulating good karma after death. Unfortunately, most of the villagers are despicable and greedy. Not only do they steal the funerary items on the outside of the coffin, but they also want to take the things inside the coffin. In the end, they even split the coffin and used it to make fire. It's a pity for these poor people. They were famous for a time when they were alive, but they died without a burial place. On this point, Jiang Pingji could be considered to have moral integrity. The gold-rating officers did dig up graves and steal money, but they wouldn't go so far as to remove the things worn on the bodies, and not even leave a coffin behind. Of course, this was just the pot calling the kettle black. There was no difference in essence. The grave of Hua Yuan's parents was also destroyed. There was a robber's hole that had been filled in nearby. It looked full of potholes. Even though it had been destroyed beyond recognition, one could still see the wealth of the deceased when they were alive. This was not a standard that ordinary people could have. Most of the graves nearby were overgrown with weeds, and some were even used as nests by small animals. Only the grave of Hua Yuan's parents looked rather clean. The weeds around it had been carefully pulled out, and there were no bones scattered outside. There seemed to be no need to guess who had tidied it up. Hua Yuan looked at the grave. He seemed to be in a trance. His eyes were filled with tears. His parents had died of the plague when he was young. His uncle and aunt had taken advantage of his young age and stolen his family's wealth. They had caused him to live in pain from a young age to a young man. If the plague had taken him away, he wouldn't have had to suffer for more than 30 years. Hua Yuan knelt in front of his parents' grave and whispered. Jiang Pingji didn't disturb him. She just watched quietly and treated herself as the background. After about a quarter of an hour, Hua Yuan's eyebrows relaxed. It was as if a burden had been lifted from his heart. His breathing became stable. Hua Yuan bowed to Jiang Pingji and said sincerely, "Thank you, Master Lanting." Jiang Pingji said, "Do you know that when you lost your mind, you called yourself Lu Shi?" Hua Yuan wasn't surprised by her question. Apart from that, he couldn't think of any other reason why a noble would appear before him. "I didn't know about it before. I only found out about it later." Hua Yuan's breathing fluctuated as he talked about it. He seemed to be suppressing his emotions, but his eyes revealed his true feelings. Remorse and pain almost drowned him. Of course, these emotions weren't directed at Jiang Pingji. They were directed at other people, such as the young master he treated like his own, his chief of the Public Security Bureau, and the people who had died directly or indirectly at his hands. He didn't intend for those people to die, but he did cause them to die. Hua Yuan didn't want to explain himself. He only wanted to seek relief through death. "Can I see him?" Jiang Pingji's suggestion was beyond Hua Yuan's expectations. His expression froze in shock. "It's not impossible, but, Master Lanting, you don't know. That thing seems to be especially afraid of you." Hua Yuan could wake up and temporarily regain his sanity because Jiang Pingji's breathing was close. Jiang Pingji said, "Are you saying that you can't make him come out?" Hua Yuan said shamefully, "This isn't something I can control." If he could control the appearance of those annoying personalities, he wouldn't have ended up like this. Jiang Pingji said, "If that's the case, it's a pity." When she first met Hua Yuan, she could tell that there were many personalities in his body. Now that she looked at him again, those messy personalities were gone. What replaced them was a muddy and broken secondary personality. It was like the product of the personalities devouring each other. This secondary personality was probably the so-called Lu Shi. Even if he was awakened, he would still be an irrational monster. "I'm not that crazy to kill my own child in front of my parents' graves. I'll give you a chance. End it yourself." Jiang Pingji's hand, which was on the god-slaying sword, dropped. She threw a dagger to Hua Yuan. Hua Yuan looked at the dagger and smiled. Chapter 1708. Be careful, my lord. The change happened in an instant. Just as Jiang Pingji turned around, Hua Yuan, who had picked up the dagger, suddenly had a ferocious look on his face. He held the dagger in his hand and was about to stab Jiang Pingji in the back. Wei Si and the rest were a little further away and could not rush to escort the emperor at this distance. They could only shout out a warning. The idle audience sitting in front of the screen was scared out of their wits. Before they could scream, Jiang Pingji, who was ambushed by Hua Yuan, seemed to have grown a pair of eyes on the back of her head. She unsheathed her god-slaying sword and hit Hua Yuan's wrist with the back of the sword, knocking the dagger out of his hand. Looking at Hua Yuan, who looked like a completely different person, Jiang Pingji said, "You're out." Suppressing the primary personality in an instant, this secondary personality that called itself Lu Shi was really tenacious and scheming. At this moment, Hua Yuan's expression was ferocious. His gaze was fierce, and he let out a beast-like growl from his throat. The retainer reacted and quickly subdued Hua Yuan. How could Hua Yuan, who was almost at the end of his rope, compare to a few strong retainers? Naturally, he was suppressed to the point where he couldn't get up. Give it back to me." Hua Yuan, no Lu Shi, the secondary personality, stared at Jiang Pingji's face with hatred and hatred. Jiang Pingji asked him calmly, "Return what to you?" "Return my body to me. I am Lu Shi. I am the ruler of the world. I am. You are not, I am." He opened his fingers and tried to grab the corner of Jiang Pingji's clothes, but she looked at him with pity. "You don't even know who you are. Don't you think that's too sad?" How could the other party be willing to listen to what she said? He tried for a long time, but still couldn't get close. In the end, he could only roar in pain. The red veins that covered his eyes made him look especially terrifying. Even when he was out of control, he was still quite strong. The squire had no choice but to use extreme measures. One of them pressed down on Hua Yuan's head and forced him to lower his head. "You monster! You've taken over my body. You're the monster." His voice carried the hoarseness of a wild beast. Even though he was restrained by several subordinates, he still used all of his strength to resist. "Go catch her. She's a monster." Lu Zheng and Wei Si caught up to them. They were so frightened that their breathing was in disorder. Their faces were still full of shock. Is the Lord all right? Why did Hua Yuan suddenly lose his mind? The scene from before was truly too thrilling. Who could have imagined that Hua Yuan would suddenly launch a sneak attack? If not for the Lord's superb martial arts, she would have been ambushed. Just thinking about that scene, Wei Xi's face was as pale as a wall that had been painted white. Jiang Pingji comforted them with a gentle voice. Don't worry, a mere madman can't hurt me. Don't you know how powerful I am? Not to mention that Jiang Pingji was always on guard. Even if she was defenseless, the opponent would not be able to hurt her at all. Wei Xi secretly glanced at the deranged Hua Yuan and suggested in a low voice, Your Highness, you should hand him over to Ci and Xiao Yin to deal with. He still had a lingering fear from the scene just now. He was really worried that something bad would happen again. Jiang Pingji waved her hand and refused. She would be even more worried if the two of them were to face the crazy Hua Yuan. It doesn't matter. I have something to say to him. I'll be fine after I'm done. Wei Ci and Xiao Yin could not argue with her, so they could only obey her orders and retreat. Before the entourage retreated, he used hemp rope to tie Hua Yuan up. He used a lot of strength and almost lost a lot of weight. Jiang Pingji looked at Hua Yuan, who was unable to break free, and the corners of her lips curled into an unfriendly smile. She used a volume that only the two of them could hear and asked, You said you are Lu Xi? Hua Yuan's second personality stared at Jiang Pingji with a venomous gaze, as if he wanted to use his eyes to kill her. I said you are pitiful. You really are pitiful. You've lived such a painful life that you can't tell the real from the fake. Jiang Pingji did not mind. Instead, she smiled and squatted down to eye level with him. Lu Xi died at the age of 12. The person in front of you, who is using the identity of Lu, she is someone you don't even know. Tell me, are you Lu Xi, or the me in front of you? This personality, to be precise, should be the Jiang Pingji, in Hua Yuan's imagination. The reason why he called himself Lu Xi was that Jiang Pingji's real identity had never been made public. What do you mean? The second personality panted, as if he wanted to see through Jiang Pingji's facade. Jiang Pingji said, I mean there is no Lu Xi in this world. If there is no Lu Xi, then who are you? You lied to me. Jiang Pingji sneered. Whether I lied to you or not, shouldn't you know best in your heart? As she spoke, she reached out and touched the space between his eyebrows with 2 fingers. It was a simple action, but it made the other's body tremble uncontrollably. What are you trying to do? He tried to turn his face away from her hand, but he failed repeatedly. Go to sleep. Everything will be over when you wake up. As soon as she finished speaking, the second personality felt a force pulling him out of his body. His limbs and bones were in excruciating pain. Demon sorcery? After a while, Jiang Pingji's hand clenched into a fist, as if she was holding something in her palm. She exerted a little force and crushed it. The second personality only had time to let out a short and sharp scream, before he quickly calmed down. After that, Jiang Pingji's gaze did not leave Hua Yuan. She watched as his eyes turned from cloudy to clear, and his rationality returned. When he realized what had happened, Hua Yuan could only smile bitterly. I, Master Lanting, have failed to live up to your good intentions. Jiang Pingji had kindly given him a chance to kill himself to preserve his dignity. She did not expect the second personality to jump out and cause trouble. After all the twists and turns, she still had to do it herself. If there is a next life, open your eyes wide and reincarnate into a good one. She did not like Hua Yuan, but most of her disgust was directed at the second personality who stirred up trouble. Compared to her, the main personality was somewhat innocent. Hua Yuan heaved a sigh of relief. Thank you. As he was about to die, he did not mourn. Instead, he smiled in relief. To him, death was liberation and a new lease of life. As soon as he finished speaking, a dazzling white light flashed before his eyes. His neck felt slightly cold. Before he could even feel the pain, his head had already fallen to the ground. Go and bury his body. Build a new grave next to his parents. If we leave him alone, he will most likely become dinner for the beasts nearby. Jiang Pingji sheathed the god-slaying sword and ordered her entourage, gather a complete corpse for him. When they descended the mountain, Wei Xi saw that his lord was still pursing her lips. He thought she was still angry about Hua Yuan. "My lord, you don't seem to be in a good mood. Is it because of Hua Yuan?" Jiang Pingji said. "Half of it is, and the other half is not." According to Wei Xi, Hua Yuan had lost his mind in his previous life. However, the fact that he had split into a Lu Shi in this life made Jiang Pingji somewhat concerned. She had personally come to take a look, thinking that there would be some clues. She did not expect it to be simple schizophrenia. Chapter 1709. Nanxing was the unluckiest of the 5 countries in the world. First, Nanxing was destroyed and the Nanman massacred. Then, the feudal lords rose up and formed an alliance to fight against the barbarians. After more than 10 years of war, all the prefectures were in a state of waiting for development, but from time to time, mobs and bandits would cause trouble. Jiang Pingji had the intention to govern, but it was a long project that could not be solved in 2 or 3 days. Everything had to be done in a down-to-earth manner, one step at a time. After dealing with Hua Yuan's matter, Jiang Pingji was not in a hurry to leave Ningzhou with her people, because something was holding her back. The flood in Ningzhou is so serious? Jiang Pingji and her people temporarily stayed in the prefecture government of Ningzhou. The prefecture government had not been renovated for many years. It looked worse than the private houses of ordinary merchants. Fortunately, the prefecture government was not a jerry-built project. It could still be lived in after some cleaning. Jiang Pingji stayed there for 2 days. When she was free, she thought that the prefecture government should have the files of previous years. It was also the best way to understand the situation in Ningzhou. She ordered people to sort out the files that had piled up in the state mansion. As soon as they opened the storeroom, they were shocked. Piles and piles of files were haphazardly piled up, with a thick layer of dust on them. The rancid air inside was so choking that it was hard to breathe. They sorted out the files in the warehouse for 2 days before moving them out. Many of the files had been destroyed by moths. They sorted them out and put them away. Jiang Pingji picked them and looked at them. She did not know if she did not look, but she was shocked when she saw them. Not only were there unjust and false cases that had piled up for many years, but there were also a large number of flood records. After looking at them, Jiang Pingji knew that there would be floods in Ningzhou every few years. It would be fine if the floods did not come, but when they did, the mountains would be flooded. Countless people would die and many crops would not be spared. Jiang Pingji asked them to find the bamboo slips related to the flood control. In the end, she was speechless to find that there were not even 10% of such records. Many of the contents were perfunctory. Only after a lot of effort to sort them out did they come up with some useful information. Zixiao, send someone to find out if there are people who have lived in Ningzhou for a long time. Ask them about the flood situation over the years. Lu Jing asked. Controlling the flood is not a short-term task. It consumes a lot of manpower, material resources, and financial resources. How long do you plan to stay here? She had to prioritize. The flood did not happen every year, and it would not be effective in 1 or 2 years. Instead of wasting time here, Jiang Pingji might as well do something else and take complete control of Nanxing as soon as possible. If she delayed for too long, Zhongzhou would recover, and she would miss the best opportunity to reclaim Zhongzhou. Lu Jing still did not know what Qiguan Rang and Sun Wen had done to Zhongzhou. The information was not on the same level, so his considerations were somewhat incorrect. If he had known that these 2 deities were stirring up trouble in Zhongzhou, causing the entire nation to be in turmoil, he probably wouldn't have said this. Jiang Pingji said. It's precisely because the flood control mission involves so much that I'm even more worried about handing it over to people I'm not familiar with. I'm afraid that they won't do a good job. At the very least, it's better to understand the details and strive to have a clear idea of what's going on. Then, I'll hand it over to someone else so that I don't have to worry about the other party deceiving me. There would be no more wars in the short term. Jiang Pingji wanted to buy as much time as possible to restore the livelihood of the local people and let them settle down. He who wins the hearts of the people will win the world. As long as the people were loyal to her, She was not afraid that the people in the rear would be egged on to rebel. Lu Zheng saw that Jiang Pingji had her own plans. Out of his trust in her, he stopped trying to persuade her. After 2 days of investigation and sorting out, Jiang Pingji basically found out the source of the flood in Ningzhou. She was angry and amused at the same time. The destruction of Nanxing is really self-inflicted. You can't blame it all on the 4 factions of Nanman. Their roots are rotten. If they were to die, they would die later. The 4 factions of Nanman would just send Nanxing to heaven earlier. The flood in Ningzhou was not about anything else. It was mainly about the blockage of the river, and the officials' connivance with the gentry clans occupying the riverbed near the flood discharge channel. Some people even transported soil to make farmland. Coupled with the accumulation of silt in the downstream river, the water system in Ningzhou was becoming more and more blocked. During the rainy season, it was fine if the rain was normal, but once it exceeded the normal amount, it was easy to cause a flood. The river would flow backwards and drown the crops. Before Nanxing was destroyed, Ningzhou would allocate a sum of money to control the flood every year and regularly send people to dredge the river. Even though there were cases of corruption and bribery, God gave face. There were occasional floods, but the scale was not large. Since the destruction of Nanxing, each prefecture and county had to endure the invasion of Nanman and face the domination of the local forces. Naturally, no one would allocate money to clean up the river. In the eyes of many short-sighted people, cleaning up the river was like throwing money into the river. It only made a sound, but it did not make money. The consequences of doing so came quickly. During the more than 10 years of war, Ningzhou had 2 major floods and 5 minor floods. About 10,000 people died. Over the years, the value of the crops lost was nearly 1 million strings of coins. According to the descriptions of the villagers, the floods in the past few years were getting worse. This year's luck was good. There was not much rainfall during the rainy season, and there was no movement in the river. But next year, it was hard to say. Jiang Pingji asked someone to take her to various blocked river channels to take a look. When she came back, she drew a simple picture. It's not practical to directly clean up the main river channel. We don't have enough time, money and manpower, Jiang Pingji said. It's better to clean up these few tributaries first, and expand the river to share the pressure of the main river channel. When we have time, we can dredge the main river channel. Jiang Pingji circled a few more places and said, it's better to change these few turns and straighten them, so that the flood discharge will be smoother. Lu Zheng did not have much of an opinion. Who do you plan to hand over to, my lord? The original government office in Ningzhou had collapsed. Before Jiang Pingji attacked, the internal affairs of Ningzhou were controlled by the local gentry. It was almost like a local court. She cleaned up a wave and got rid of the vermin. But there was no one available. Jiang Pingji thought about it and said, didn't we issue a recruitment order a while ago? The first batch of conscription has been issued. Pick a few reliable people from them. Oh right, that person called Miyu is not bad. I remember that one of the questions in her answer sheet was to simulate how to manage the river channel. Her hypothetical suggestion is quite feasible. It's not just an armchair strategist. It can be seen that this person is also a man of action. He's worth putting in an important position. Jiang Pingji never cared about the background or qualifications of the people she hired. She only looked at their sense of responsibility and ability. Although this kind of employment system was not in line with this era, Jiang Pingji was the one who made the rules. Only others obeyed her. There was no reason for her to compromise. In a few words, Jiang Pingji decided to hand over the affairs of Ningzhou to Miyu, a greenhorn. I'll write a letter asking her to come over and take up the post. When she comes, we'll leave. Even if Miyu had confidence in herself, when this letter of appointment was placed in front of her, she felt like she was dreaming. Chapter 17:10. Milady, is this true? When it was time for dinner, the concubine delivered a sumptuous meal to Miyu on time. Unexpectedly, she was staring at a letter of appointment in a daze. She casually asked what was written on it, and Miyu said that it was a letter of appointment from Duke Lanting ordering her to take up her post in Ning province. The concubine was shocked. Miyu said, This letter of appointment was personally handed to me by Duke Lanting's trusted aide, so it can't be fake. It's just that, the concubine finished for her. It's just that you think this good news came too suddenly. Miyu sighed. Although I have ambitions, I also know my own limits. This was indeed a good thing that fell from the sky. But Miyu was worried that she would be crushed to death by the pie before she could eat it. The concubine smiled. This is the first time I've heard Milady say such unconfident words. In the concubine's impression, this first madam of her family was a capable person. No matter what she encountered, she always seemed to have a well-thought-out plan. And no matter how difficult the problem was, she could easily solve it. This isn't something that can be solved with confidence alone. I've never met the Duke of Lanting before, and the only thing he knows about me is that recruitment event. Just how daring does he have to be to entrust such an important task to a person he doesn't even know of? Mika said. The concubine didn't understand the affairs of the bureaucracy, but from what Miyu said, it didn't seem like a good thing. Then what should we do? Could there be other secrets to this matter? Is he trying to capture Milady to bear the blame? The concubine was a little anxious. She was really worried about Miyu's safety. After all, this family was basically supported by Miyu. If something happened to Miyu, with just that irresponsible man, all the concubines in the backyard would have no one to rely on. Milady, can we reject this matter? We can't just send ourselves to death for nothing. Seeing that the concubine's thoughts were getting more and more ridiculous, Miyu laughed and interrupted her random thoughts. What are you thinking about? I'm just curious about the Duke of Lanting's intentions, but I don't think she's that bad. Michu picked up the letter of appointment from the table and folded it carefully, smoothing every corner of it. This letter was the key to her official career. Whether she would rise to the top or not, it all depended on this letter. Michu said, however, I also heard that the Duke of Lanting is a very unexpected woman. She likes to do things unpredictably, and ordinary people can't predict what she will do. The concubine was comforted by Miyu, but she still looked at her worriedly. We can also look on the bright side. Perhaps the Duke of Lanting really has a sharp eye for talent. He could tell at a glance that your wife is a great talent. This matter is not urgent. Let's eat first. Mikan wasn't confident either, but she didn't want to infect the girl in front of her with her anxiety and worry for nothing. Besides, the Duke of Lanting wouldn't do anything that would ruin her reputation. This is most likely an opportunity for your madam. If I can grasp it in the future, there will definitely be a place for me. The concubine didn't understand these things, but since Mikan said so, she could only believe it. After dinner, the candle in Mikan's study didn't go out. It burned until the sun rose the next day. Mikan spent the whole night flipping through the books and notes related to flood control. She reviewed every part and extracted useful content to compile into a booklet. The rest of the time, she searched for information related to Ningzhou. Only by doing her homework could one know oneself and the enemy, and win 100 battles. However, staying up late was the result of being depressed. She slept for 4 hours, freshened up, and hurried to the prefecture's government office. Before Mikan arrived, Feng Yu mentioned her to Yang Si. Outsiders didn't understand Jiang Pingji, but they had been serving her for nearly a decade. They knew what kind of person their lord was. Jiang Pingji never did useless things. Since she chose Mikan, it must be because she was competent, not because of other reasons. However, in the eyes of outsiders, it was probably not a surprise but a shock. The Lord's letter of appointment probably scared that person. He hasn't come to take the roll call at this time. Could he have been scared away? As it was nearing mealtime, Yang Si had the kitchen serve the food. Nanqing's food was different from Dongqing's. The latter had a heavier taste, while the former had a lighter taste. The cooking was also more exquisite. Wherever Jiang Pingji went to war, he would search for delicacies. Recently, he even planned to write a book about his experiences in food. The world was big, but eating was the most important. Feng Zhen's sarcasm reached his ears, but it only stayed for a few seconds before he deleted it. Yang Si, did you hear what I said? Yang Si said, I did. Feng Zhen said, then tell me when will Mikan come? Yang Si took a sip of the soup. The soup was fragrant but not greasy. When he swallowed it, the fragrance lingered in his mouth. It was indeed delicious. Don't you have a wife? Why are you so concerned about me, Can? Fengzhen. This guy really didn't listen to what he said. Yang Si saw that Fengzhen's face was showing signs of darkening. He coughed lightly and became slightly more serious. Which of the women that my lord has taken a liking to is simple. This Mikan is the same. You don't have to worry about her, Yang Si said. Even if she's a colleague, she's a married woman, and you're a married man. Gossip is a fearful thing. It's never wrong to keep a distance. Yang Si really didn't hear what Fengzhen said. He thought that this guy's old habits were acting up again. So he reminded him. Fengzhen's face completely darkened. I'm asking you, did that Mikan be scared away by my lord's sudden important position? You're thinking too much. Yang Si. His strong desire to live made Yang Si change the topic. Speaking of which, how talented is this Mikan that my lord values her so much? She was suddenly promoted to the position of a high-ranking official. Even a celestial monkey wouldn't have such speed. Fengzhen wasn't that easy to fool. But before he could say anything, someone outside said that Mikan was here. The two of them were suspicious. Why is she looking for us instead of going to the roll call ceremony? Let her in. When Mikan came, she brought a pile of bamboo slips and cloth. She was here to ask for advice. Yesterday, I received my lord's letter of appointment appointing me to Ning province. I'm terrified and deeply feel that I'm incompetent. I'm afraid that I'll let my lord down. I spent the night looking for a lot of information related to flood control. But I'm inexperienced, and there are still many things I don't understand. Mikan lowered herself and treated Yang Si and Fengzhen with even more respect. She didn't have the slightest bit of arrogance and complacency after gaining power. She hadn't been in officialdom before. But she knew that being put in an important position as soon as she arrived would more or less attract the dissatisfaction and hatred of some people. She didn't know what Yang Si and Fengzhen thought of her, but she knew that she had to correct her attitude and reduce the hatred as much as possible. If she could learn something from the two of them to help her take fewer detours, that would be even better. Fengzhen and Yang Si looked at each other and understood what the other meant. This Mikan was interesting. Chapter 17:11. Michu's choice was undoubtedly correct. As an outsider who had been promoted to a high-level position within a few days of the conquest, there were many people who were jealous of her. With Fengzhen and Yang Si's ideological awareness, they would not argue with her, let alone deliberately suppress Michu. But what about others? Could others trust Jiang Pingji's choice so much that they would not make things difficult for Michu? In places that Michu could not see, there were many people who were jealous and doubtful of her. Some just sneered and watched the show, waiting for her to fall from a high place. Others looked at her with eyes full of prejudice, carefully scanning every inch of her, trying to find evidence that could pull her down from her high horse. These people were still okay. They did not put their malice into action, but there were also people who had already planned to make her never rise again. Her starting point was too high. Many people struggled for years, but did not even reach 1/10 of what she had today. Her starting point was the end point of others. How could she not be jealous, and resentful? Because of this, Michu had to be even more careful not to leave any evidence that others could use against her. As a smart person, Michu naturally understood this logic. She did not dare to neglect important officials like Yang Si and Fengzhen in the slightest. Even though she was now a hot new noble in the eyes of outsiders, Michu still put on the attitude of a junior and seriously asked for advice. Rather than asking for advice, it was more like the three of them sat together and discussed, exchanging what they needed at the same time. As the exchange deepened, Yang Si and the others found that Michu gave them more surprises than they had imagined. It could be seen that their lord did not choose Michu to go to Ningzhou on a whim. It was indeed because Michu was the most suitable candidate. She had a good attitude, was humble, and was also smart. How could such a colleague not be liked? However, there was one thing that Yang Si did not understand, so he asked. I heard that Su Chun has lived in the inner house for a long time. Why is he so familiar with the rivers everywhere? Not only was he familiar with them, but he had also done a lot of homework. This amount of homework was not something that could be done in one night. It was clearly the experience accumulated over a long period of time, and it also needed to be investigated and understood on the spot. It was not something that could be done on paper. These shouldn't be the focus of the women in the inner house, right? Mika chatted with Yangxi and the others for more than 2 hours, and learned a lot from them. The three of them also changed from the respectful way they used to address each other, calling each other by their first name. The surname Xuchong sounded a little strange, but since it was bestowed by an elder, there should be a deeper meaning behind it. Mika smiled and said, "My grandfather used to be a governor for a few years, and was fortunate enough to serve the people for a few years. My father was also once conscripted into the government, but due to his health, he had no choice but to resign. Although the two of them had not been officials for long, they had always been concerned about the common people. As a result, there were many books related to flood control at home. When I was young, I was influenced by my father and learned a lot. I never thought that there would be a day when I would be able to put it to use." When Michu was still a child, her father would often sigh beside her ear. "It's a pity that my son is not a man. Otherwise, he would definitely be able to compete with the young talents of the world." Michu was young, but she was very competitive. After she was enlightened, she was often praised by her elders, so she couldn't bear to hear even the slightest negative comment. Her father acknowledged her talent, but rejected her because of her gender. This made Michu very unhappy, so she immediately retorted, "Father, your daughter is better at learning than anyone else. Why can't I fight for it?" Her cousins were all older than her, but none of them were as smart as she was. Even though they were enlightened a few years earlier than her, they were still beaten by her. Michu's father sighed and stroked his daughter's head. "Although my daughter is ambitious, the women of the world will eventually have to marry and have children, living in the inner courtyard. What does a woman in the inner courtyard need to learn? At most, she'll just have to help her husband teach her children, give her needlework, and do some favors." Michu angrily slammed the bamboo scroll on the table. "Your daughter doesn't want to learn those things. Of course, you don't have to learn them now, but when you reach the age of 15 and are getting married, you'll still have to learn them well." Despite her young age, Michu had a good memory. Even now, she still remembered what her father had told her back then. As she grew older, Michu continued to be a top student. Those peers who were defeated by her couldn't catch up to her, so they used words to attack her. What's the point of a girl learning so many classics? No matter how well you learn, you'll still have to marry and have children. The inner courtyard doesn't have any use for these things. So isn't it a waste of time for you to learn them? You might as well learn the 4 arts. In the future, you'll be able to play the zither and flute together with your future husband, appreciating poetry and painting together. If you learn these wild things, how will your future husband's family be satisfied with you as their daughter-in-law? What a fool. Even if I learn it, it's useless. It's a waste of time and energy." While other girls of her age were chasing butterflies, admiring flowers, or boating on the lake, Michigan Chu did nothing but study. Studying was a tough job, so how could Michu enjoy it? But she couldn't take this lying down. If she gave up halfway, what kind of faces would these people secretly use to mock and ridicule her? She had studied for so many years, so why did they say useless was really useless? Who set this rule? Could it be those men who were inferior to her in every aspect, who had nothing but jealousy and sarcasm? Why was Michu still unable to forget her late husband? Because he was the first person Michu had met who understood and respected her. Not only were they husband and wife, but they were also close friends who shared the same ideals. In comparison, her current husband was really useless except for his face. Michu chatted with Feng Zhan and the others for several hours. Both of them learned a lot, and their impressions of each other gradually improved. After she left, Yangxi said with a smile, "Fortunately, Su Chun is a woman, and our Lord is also a woman. Otherwise, both sides would be at a disadvantage." What disadvantage? Naturally, it would be the loss of her reputation. If Jiang Pingji was a man and put Michu in an important position right from the start, not only would outsiders be jealous, But they would also make up a rumor that Mi Chu seduced men with her beauty and took advantage of the situation. Once such a rumor spread, Mi Chu's reputation would never be cleared. No matter how well she did, people would still gossip about her. There would always be people who would use the most malicious words to slander her, saying that her power, status, achievements, and glory were all obtained from the Lord through her beauty. Only in this way could those petty people quell the jealousy in their hearts and absolve themselves of being useless and useless. If Mi Chu was a man, that would be even more incredible. Wouldn't the rumors about his lord, who had been neglected for a long time, be spread like wildfire? Oh, that didn't seem quite right. His lord had put many people in an important position right from the start, and there didn't seem to be many scandals. This had always been an unsolved mystery. His lord was a female vassal. So why didn't people talk about scandals as if they were blind? Fengjin said scandals? Chapter 17:12. As long as it didn't involve any conspiracy, Jiang Pingji's actions were honorable. Thus, the news of her appointing Mi Chu spread like wildfire throughout the Nanxing aristocrats' circle. Who was Mi Chu? Investigate. Even after more than 10 years of war, the aristocrats of Nanxing were greatly weakened, but a starving camel was still bigger than a horse. If they wanted to investigate a person, the news would be as fast as a galloping horse. Moreover, Mi Chu was born into an aristocrat family and was famous when she was young. Many people had heard of her name and recognized her. Mi Chu was a famous talented girl when she was young. Her late husband was also a famous talented scholar. They were a famous golden couple. Later, her late husband died of illness, and Mi Chu became a widow. After a few years of silence, her presence gradually faded. Some people vaguely remembered the interesting things that happened between her and her late husband when they were young, but they didn't know that she was forced to remarry. No one could have imagined that the name Mi Liang would be mentioned once again. It wasn't because of her talent and beauty, nor was it because she was someone's wife, but because she was Mi Liang, a woman who was given such a heavy responsibility right after she was conscripted. After digging deeper, outsiders found out that so many things had happened to her. Some people praised her as a role model for the legitimate wife, because as the first wife, she managed her husband's backyard in an orderly manner. She had a harmonious relationship with her wife and concubines, and she could earn money to support the family. As her husband, he didn't have to worry about anything and only needed to eat, drink, and be merry at home. Some people criticized her as a traitor. When the aristocrats of Nanxing tacitly rejected the recruitment order, she didn't know how to avoid arousing suspicion. She forgot her pride as an aristocrat for the sake of some glory and wealth. She wagged her tail at an outsider and begged. It was extremely laughable. Some people criticized her for being a sissy and inverting yin and yang. A rebellious woman like Jiang Pingji would be destroyed sooner or later. Mi Chu had been well-read since she was young, yet she didn't understand the principles of yin and yang. Instead, she learned from Jiang Pingji and rebelled. Wasn't she afraid of angering her ancestors? Of course, although these people criticized her verbally, they were actually jealous in their hearts. According to the current situation, no one could stop Jiang Pingji's footsteps to rule the world. Whoever helped her would have the credit of founding the country. Mi Qian's ancestors were lucky enough to be able to get this opportunity. These people probably said that the grapes were sour because they couldn't eat them. Their mouths were chattering, but their hearts were filled with jealousy. Soon they found Mi Chu's current husband. She had thought that even if her second husband was worse than her first husband, it wouldn't be by much. This man is really lucky. With such a wife, he really doesn't have to do anything. If he were to marry a wife like Mi Chu, it wouldn't be 30 years less of hard work. It would be 3 lifetimes less of hard work. Thus, some of his friends who heard the news came over to say sour words, while others took the opportunity to make friends. Perhaps they would need each other's help in the future. Mi Qian's husband thought that he had struck it rich. Even the person who was usually cold to him was talking to him. He couldn't help but feel a little smug. Later on, the more he listened, the more he felt that something was wrong. Only after asking did he find out that Mi Chu had been placed in an important position right after he was subjugated. Knowing this, Michu's husband became a little distracted. His ears were filled with the admiration and flattery of others, as well as the flattery of Michu. There were even some people who secretly mocked him for being raised by his wife, saying that he was no different from a son-in-law who married into the family. He was furious, but he couldn't say anything to refute. He could only swallow his anger and not dare to utter a word. What could he do? If he had the capital to be arrogant, he would throw a divorce letter to Michu right now, and everyone would go their separate ways. That way, no one would mock him for being useless and living off a woman because of Michu. But the truth was he didn't have the guts to do so, and his parents wouldn't allow him to do so. Not to mention putting this idea into action. Even if he said it out loud, his parents would still press him down in front of his ancestors and break his legs. The world was big, but nothing was more important than the family's glory and inheritance. The son they gave birth to was disappointing, but at least the daughter-in-law they married was capable. So how could they let such a good daughter-in-law go? After being bored for 2 days, he packed his things and went to find Michu, completely forgetting that he still had a meal of bamboo scrolls to eat. What are you doing here? Michu had just arrived in Ningzhou, and this was the first time she met her lord Jiangpingji. After exchanging a few pleasantries, she was given a bunch of tasks. She was so busy that she felt dizzy. When she finally managed to find some time to return home to rest, the servants reported that her husband had come again. Isn't it all because of you? I can't stay at home anymore. Seeking refuge with Michu was naturally for the sake of peace and quiet. Michu rolled her eyes and ignored him. She hurriedly finished her lunch and prepared to seize the time to rest for a while. Her husband asked, "Don't you have anything to say?" Michu yawned, feeling sleepy, and asked casually, "Say what?" Her husband said, something like a divorce. You studied and became an official. Isn't it all for this day? As the weaker party, he really couldn't do anything when Michu proposed a divorce. After all, Michu's current backer was Jiangpingji. Michu frowned. Who's talking nonsense in your ear? Her husband said. I just feel that this day will come sooner or later. Michu smiled. Divorce isn't that difficult. So why would you think that I'm doing all I can to become an official just to separate from you? I became an official because I'm a woman. What men can do, I can also do. The purpose of a woman's life isn't to marry and bear children, but to be trapped in the backyard for the rest of her life. I became an official so that I can stand as tall as men, or even taller than them. Otherwise, what do you think? Having achieved a small part of her wish, Michu was in a good mood and didn't hide her ambition at all. Isn't that even more reason to separate? What's the point of following such a useless man? Why don't you find someone who can help you? Michu was silent for a moment, then she said, I'm very afraid of thunder. Her husband's expression froze, revealing a bit of uneasiness. Michu's parents passed away on a dark night of spring thunder, while her first husband passed away on a summer afternoon of drought and thunder. Normally, Michu's expression wouldn't change even if Mt. Tai collapsed in front of her. But when it came to thunder, she would tremble in fear. Her current husband was truly a scumbag, but even the scumbag had some bright spots. For example, he accidentally found out that Michu was afraid of thunder, so every time there was a thunderstorm, regardless of whether he was sleeping in his concubine's room or having a banquet outside, he would always rush back to accompany her. It was because of these small bright spots that Michu tolerated him. No matter how scumbag he was still her husband in name, half a relative. She really didn't want to return to being alone. After her husband passed away, she was truly alone and helpless as a widow. The scene of her so-called relatives forcing her to marry someone else was still vivid in her mind. Divorce? Perhaps in the future, but it wasn't urgent right now. At the very least, she had to wait until she had her own bloodline before kicking him aside. This man was a scumbag in every other aspect, but his face was truly good-looking, as pleasing to the eye as a room full of concubines. After this conversation, the two of them didn't talk about divorce and returned to their usual lifestyle. Chapter 1713. Sigh. Why didn't I realize that there were so many things to do in the past? Jiang Pingji looked at the official work piled up on her desk and sighed softly. She looked like she had nothing to live for. Her work efficiency was high, but she didn't see it decrease after being busy for so long. The most despairing thing was that she couldn't see the end of these days. She really wanted to overturn them all. Nanqing can't be compared to Dongqing. Dongqing has been governed by my lord for so many years, and has a set of regulations. Many trivial matters don't bother my lord. However, Nanqing's decade-long war has just ended. Everything is being done everywhere. It's normal for them to be busy. After being busy for a while, when Nanqing's post-war construction was on the right track, there would be much less things that needed Jiang Pingji's personal instructions. Wei Ci patiently comforted her with a faint smile on his lips. Just looking at him made her feel like her mood was improving. Jiang Pingji was just complaining. She stopped after a few words. It's fine if you're busy, but you keep taking up my time alone with Zixiao. That's what makes me angry. I tricked Xiaoyin into giving me this time. Wei Ci's mouth twitched uncontrollably when he heard that. Even though Lu Zheng had just joined, he seemed to have been infected by Yang Si and the rest. He had a terrible obsession with the young lord who was nowhere to be found. Jiang Pingji was also clever. She used the young lord as a shield and tricked Lu Zheng into taking care of many trivial matters. If Lu Zheng and the rest knew that their lord had been using contraception, and that it was impossible to have a young lord, they might vomit blood out of anger. Don't let Xiaoyin hear this. If he hears it, he'll go all out and fight you. Yang Si and the rest were loyal to Jiang Pingji, but Jiang Pingji was merciless when it came to tricking them. Wei Ci, who was familiar with the inside story, watched their interaction. He often felt guilty, as if he was helping a tyrant do evil. Jiang Pingji smiled. I'm a very cautious person. Zixiao, you still don't believe me? Wei Ci was speechless. How is this something to be proud of? Believe it or not, Yang Sifeng and the rest would cry in front of her. This Mi Chu is really something. She actually managed to get Jing Rong and Zishur to put in a good word for her. You should know that those two are the most difficult to deal with, and also the hardest to please. Jiang Pingji read and saw the message Yang Si sent over. Not only was there a work report, but there were also praises for Miyu. Besides Yang Si, Feng Zhen had also put in a good word for Miyu. Not only did they affirm Miyu's character and talent, they also affirmed her ability. These two were not people who were easy to get along with. It was extremely difficult for an outsider to grasp their pulse, let alone curry favor with them. It was rare for them to take the initiative to speak up for someone. Jiang Pingji had known them for so many years. She could count on 5 hands the number of people who had the ability to make them like her to the max. Wei Ci said, "This is not an accident." Back in her previous life, when Miku was in the bureaucracy, she was hated by many. Even though no one dared to speak against her openly, there were definitely many people who cursed her to die in secret. She was hated and cursed by so many people, yet she could still live peacefully. How could she do that without some ability? With her abilities, it wasn't as difficult as she had imagined to increase Gao Yangxi and Feng Zhen's favorability. Jiang Pingji smiled and said, "I have even more expectations for her. I hope she won't disappoint me." Wei Ci said, "My lord means." He frowned slightly, realizing that something was not quite right. Listening to what his lord meant, she wanted to promote Miyu to a higher position? Thinking of this, Wei Ci did not quite agree. According to Miyu's ability, she could use facts to convince everyone. It was only a matter of time before she reached the height of her previous life. His lord seemed to want to spoil things by pushing them from behind. Wouldn't this have the opposite effect? We have Nongqin in the military, but we still lack one in the civil field, Jiang Pingji said. I lack a woman like Miyu. She appeared at the right time. There was no lack of outstanding women around her, but these women were seriously biased toward subjects. The female generals, led by Jiang Nongqin, had barely managed to gain a foothold, but the civil field had yet to be developed. Wei Ci said, "Isn't there a lady from the Wei family?" He reminded his lord that Wei Jingxian had followed her husband Feng Jin and helped her for many years. She could not forget her just because her presence was low. Jiang Pingji said. It's not that I haven't considered Jing Xian, but her temperament is on the soft side. She's not aggressive and doesn't have enough ambition. Bai Yuexia is not bad either, Jiang Pingji said. Her? I have special arrangements for her. She just needs to be engrossed in her studies and not get involved in those messy fights. Wei Jingxian was not bad, but her temperament and family background meant that she was more inclined to be conservative. Without ambition, how could she have the motivation to advance? Without aggressiveness, how could she demonstrate to the enemy and show her strength? If she couldn't do that, then she was not the person she wanted. Bai Yuexia was not bad either. According to Wei Ci, her future achievements would not be low. However, there were specializations in different fields. Bai Yuexia was from the Mahists, so her battlefield was not the court. Jiang Pingji also did not want Bai Yuexia to focus on that. What she needed was a benchmark, so that the world could look at the achievements and status that women could achieve in the political arena through this benchmark. Jiang Nongqin was a martial artist, Wei Jingxian was too gentle, Bai Yuexia was partial to subjects. As for the others, they either lacked experience or talent. They could not become the most important chess pieces in Jiang Pingji's hands. Just when she was at her wit's end, Mi Chu appeared. Even if Mi Chu looked harmless, Jiang Pingji could see that her eyes were filled with desire and ambition for power. What was more precious was that Mi Chu had the ability to match her ambition. The timing of Mi Chu's appearance was just right. Therefore, Jiang Pingji planned to set Mi Chu as an important benchmark for women in the court. The women of the world would look up to her. Only when the civil and military complemented each other can they truly stand firm in the court. With them, the world would not look down on women as they used to. Wei Ci understood Jiang Pingji's intention after thinking for a while. In that case, Mi Chu is indeed the most suitable candidate. Jiang Pingji said to Wei Ci honestly. I think so, but whether or not she can grasp the opportunity depends on Mi Chu herself. If she can be supported, I will naturally work hard to cultivate her. If she is a useless person who can't be supported, I will not force her. After all, supporting an unworthy benchmark would not only be unsatisfactory, but it would also easily lead to a backlash. Wei Ci said, My lord's plans are far-reaching. You will definitely achieve what you want. Jiang Pingji smiled and said, Zixiao's words are still so in line with my thoughts. Because Jiang Pingji was obsessed with work, the idle people expressed that the content of the recent livestream was a little boring, and they were a little tired of watching it. Fortunately, the idle people still had a fountain of happiness, dream of 1,000 years of luck. Chapter 17:14. I love dreams of 1,000 years. I'm rubbing my hands in excitement. Now it's the most exciting time of the week. Even though dreams of 1,000 years had been around for many years, and the number of lucky people had exceeded 3 digits, it did not diminish their enthusiasm. Dreams of 1,000 years only happen once a week, and there was only one slot each time. There were more than 10 billion people in 2 dimensions. On the day of the lucky draw, it was much harder to get a slot in the streaming room than usual. Even the big shots who bought houses in the streaming room often failed. Getting a slot in the streaming room was just getting the right to the lucky draw. The streaming room would choose the chosen one from 5 million people. Every chosen one was the most dazzling existence among billions of people. Their luck was off the charts. It was harder than winning a lottery ticket worth hundreds of millions. Count of 1,000 faces. After all the chaos, I finally made it in. It's my first time getting a slot in the streaming room in half a year. I'm crying my heart out. Dang Zhan Huzing Fei. It's time for the lucky draw. I feel more excited than being a groom on this day. Gurin Rugio. Look, this lucky person is of pure European descent. He's fair and beautiful. Why don't we roast him? Yuan Chutian Fun. I'm curious about the identity of the lucky person this time. Is it possible for him to meet the streamer? Yuban Baobo. It's basically impossible. I've been following dreams of 1,000 years for so many years, and so far only 3 people have achieved this. According to the statistics of the big shots, only 3 of the 3-digit lucky emperors had ever been in the same frame as Jiang Pingji. There were less than 20 lucky emperors who had direct or indirect contact with celebrities in this dimension. The rest of the lucky emperors had basically transmigrated for half a day and traveled to ancient times before returning. They traveled through time with various identities, and the real identities of the lucky people were also varied. There was basically no pattern to it. It was impossible to predict who the lucky person was this week, and what identity he had traveled through time. It was precisely because of this unknown that Dreams of 1,000 Years became more interesting and exciting. Every time the lucky draw was held, the lurking idle people would jump out. The increase in the bullet screen in the streaming room was in the tens of thousands. Jiang Pingji glanced at the screen from the corner of her eyes when she was dealing with the official documents. The lucky draw result popped up on the screen. Congratulations to the number 1 playboy of the capital city for winning the slot of Dreams of 1,000 Years. Seeing this result, the bullet screen in the live broadcast room seemed to have stopped for 3 seconds, followed by countless question marks. Mudfish, excuse him, who? How could such a person have the chance to transmigrate? Jiang Pingji frowned, wondering why Salted Fish's reaction was so strange. In the next second, a kind-hearted person explained it to her. It turned out that this capital's number 1 playboy was a young master from a rich and powerful family. He had never committed any crimes, but he was a scumbag. The number of girlfriends he had dated could form a group, and many of them had even had abortions for him. The year before last, he obeyed his parents' arrangement and got married. The girl's family background was far inferior to his, so she couldn't control him at all. This young master was even more fearless. The red flag at home was still standing, but the colorful flags were fluttering outside. Every now and then, there would be mistresses, fourths, and fifths tearing up nameless gossips. What really made this young master famous was the gossip from last month. The 81st-tier female celebrity, who failed to become a 6th-tier celebrity, was tearing up a playboy on Weibo. The female celebrity also revealed a piece of gossip that infuriated the netizens. The young master was having an affair with the female celebrity the day before his wife gave birth. His wife gave birth to a daughter 2 months ago, but he didn't go back to see her a few times. He even privately mocked his wife for being pretentious with the female celebrity. It only took a few hours for a woman to give birth. Others could walk as if they were flying the next day, but she was pretentious and had to stay in the hospital for 2 months. The young master liked the new and got tired of the old. Soon, he got tired of the female celebrity and wanted to break up. The female celebrity wanted more benefits, but the young master refused. The two of them broke down. How could the female celebrity be willing? The young master had only fulfilled half of the resources he had promised to give her. There was still the other half. The young master was impatient with the woman, who didn't know what was good for her. He was annoyed by her pestering, so he decided to freeze her. The female celebrity was just an 81st-tier celebrity in the entertainment industry. Freezing her was something the young master could do with just a word. The female celebrity was also angry. Once she was angry, she decided to perish together with the young master. She gritted her teeth and made up her mind. She simply revealed on Weibo that she was tearing up the young master. Let's not talk about whether this move of hers was rational, or if she thought of it with her feet, but her generosity made the netizens eat their fill. For a week, all kinds of skinning, all kinds of reversals, and all kinds of high energy filled the emptiness of countless night owls. The female celebrity also revealed the audio recording, which completely crushed the young master. He couldn't even clear his name. The power of the netizens was strong. Soon, the young master's family and social media accounts were all exposed. When they were exposing him, they also found the young master's account in the live broadcast room. Unexpectedly, the young master was also a loyal fan of the live broadcast room, even though it was black. What was more coincidental was that his account ID was Capital's number 1 playboy, Yanwu Kwangsha. Bah! Letting such a scumbag transmigrate is giving him a chance to go to ancient times to play with women. Green fairy tales. Maybe he's a man in a woman's clothes. It's still uncertain whether he will be beaten or not. Mei Xiang as before. This guy can become a European emperor. I feel as disgusted as eating a fly. The young master didn't care about these sour comments. He happily announced the result on Weibo, with a face full of sarcasm for the masses of salted fish. His matter was a big deal on the internet. It was trending every day, and he was almost the model of a modern scumbag. He didn't care. After all, the netizens' criticism and sour comments couldn't affect his real life. While the netizens were eating instant noodles and denouncing him, he still drove a luxury car, lived in a mansion, and slept with the woman they yearned for day and night, but couldn't have. Now it was even worse. The 1 in a billion chance of becoming a European emperor had fallen into his hands. What was this called? Not only was he rich, powerful, and handsome, but he also had luck. God had really opened his eyes. When the young master was transmigrating in his dream, the resentment in the live broadcast room almost condensed into a substance. Many of the salted fish complained that they didn't want to watch the live broadcast because they felt disgusted. In the end, the law of Wang Jing told us that the more you swore, the easier it was to be slapped in the face. Zhenxiang might be late, but she would never be absent. Jiang Pingji's curiosity was aroused by the salted fish's resentment. She opened the interface of the European Emperor's live broadcast room. Then, and 666 filled every corner of the screen. She temporarily turned off the bullet screen and looked at the content on the screen in silence for 2 seconds. The identity of the European emperor, who had transmigrated, was a bit tricky. The European emperor's wish to go to ancient times to pick up ancient beauties was not going to happen. Chapter 17:15. Yaidongwu. It's so easy for a woman to give birth. It's as easy as taking a dump. Am I right, lucky emperor? Xiaozhuer, my dear, children born naturally are smarter. Just bear with it. How can a man be more afraid of pain than your wife and mother? She was giving birth to a child, but she was screaming like a pig being slaughtered. If she were to howl like this now, she would run out of energy later. Come a cup of ice cold. The lucky queen is indeed a happy fountain. I was so desperate just now that I wanted to turn off the live broadcast room. I didn't expect. I didn't expect this guy to become a pregnant woman in labor. Oh my, I know it's wrong to gloat, but allow me to be happy first before I repent. Don't you think this pile of sh*t is so thick that you can't poop it out? The famous online quote of Capital's #1 playboy was, "Giving birth is like taking a dump." Women who say that it hurts are all pretentious. My mother's generation didn't have so many problems. She even said that she didn't want to give birth. If she doesn't give me a son, she'll get lost. These words not only angered all the female netizens, but even the male netizens felt ashamed that there was such an idiot among the men. It's easy for you to say that. If you have the ability, go and experience it first. In the end, luck won the bid. He was fortunate enough to stand out from the millions of people and become the new king of luck, obtaining the qualification to experience the birth of a pregnant woman in ancient times. When he first crossed over, he felt a little dizzy, and his whole body seemed to be drained of energy. A wave of unbearable pain spread from his lower body to his whole body. As his consciousness cleared, the pain he felt became more and more intense. In the end, he couldn't take it anymore, and tried to grab the source of the pain with his hands. As soon as he did so, his palm came into contact with her plump and taut belly, a round and tight stomach. When he realized this, the European king shivered, and his consciousness was completely awakened. He found the body in a half-sitting position on the bed, with 2 white, slender, well-proportioned legs spread wide. Lucky King looked down and realized that his round belly was blocking his view. Even if they hadn't eaten pork before, they would have seen pigs run. This posture was clearly a common production joke in period dramas. His first reaction was to beat his stomach with his hand. What kind of lousy transmigration was this? Who wanted to give birth to a child? However, the condition of this body was not very good. His actions did not affect the child in any way. Instead, it caused an even more intense contractions, causing him to wail and howl in pain. At this time, a middle-aged woman who looked like a midwife said hurriedly, "Dear, don't waste your energy now. Your baby is too big, and the delivery time is not right. If you do as I say, you will definitely be able to give birth safely." Before the European emperor could retort, the midwife ordered someone to stuff something into his mouth to prevent him from biting his tongue in pain. At the same time, she ordered 2 strong female servants to prop him up in a half-squat position. She explained, "I've delivered babies for at least 1,000 times. Many farmers' wives will squat like this to ensure that the delivery goes smoothly. This way they can use their strength. Please take a break and gather your strength. When there's movement later, muster up all your strength to give birth to the child. Just follow the servant's instructions and use all your strength." Therefore, the European emperor was forced by a house full of servants, maids, and midwives. No, he was forced to give birth. However, it was not easy to give birth to a child. Before the European emperor arrived, the pregnant woman had already used up most of her strength. She was in so much pain that she lost consciousness. It seemed that both of them were going to die soon. The European emperor's arrival injected new vitality into this body, and it was enough for the European emperor to hold on until the delivery of the child. This body would probably be very grateful for the European emperor's efforts, but the European emperor himself, he cursed crazily in his heart, but his body was held down by the female servants who mistook it for pain. For the first time, the European emperor saw how terrifying the strength of a woman who had been doing rough labor all year round could be. The 2 of them held him on both sides, and he could not move an inch no matter how hard he struggled. His stomach was in pain, and his lower body felt like it was being cut by a knife. This process was worse than death for him. Seeing that the European emperor was a little depressed, the midwife immediately encouraged him with words. The earlier he gave birth, the less pain he would suffer. If he didn't give birth soon, the child would definitely die. The European emperor cried and cursed crazily at the same time. He almost crushed the food in his mouth with his teeth. He thought that he could end the pain by exerting force, but he did not expect that the delivery process would be so long. The feeling of being cut by a knife was still with him. Because he was a lucky emperor, the system had a protective mechanism for lucky emperors. Therefore, it was wishful thinking for him to faint from the pain. Yueying, "I know it's painful for a pregnant woman to give birth. I should give my blessings to such a serious scene, but I really can't help it. Once I thought about how the soul of this body was that scumbag guy, I couldn't help but laugh out loud as I watched the stream from under my blanket." Old man sigh. "This pile of sh*t is too thick. Will the lucky emperor be traumatized for life?" Liangli angli 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 Liangli angli 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 angli. It would be best if he couldn't lift it for the rest of his life, and didn't harm innocent girls. After all, Lucky Emperor was a fountain that brought them joy. Although the salted fishes mocked him, they didn't go overboard. However, the Lucky King was still a hit. The live broadcast room was the only program that people around the world paid attention to. It was equivalent to Lucky Emperor, making a name for himself on this global platform. In the future, whoever mentioned him and saw him, their first impression would be, "Oh, so he's that scumbag who live-streamed giving birth to a child." The salted fishes were as happy as if they were celebrating the new year. In an instant, the related hot searches once again dominated the entire screen, and the server crashed. Having experienced countless battles, big and small, the face of the coder monkey, who thought he was experienced in battles, darkened. Jiang Pingji asked someone to bring her a plate of melon seeds. Every time Lucky Emperor squinted his eyes in pain and howled in pain, then his entire face contorted, she would bite a melon seed. Therefore, as soon as Wei Ci came in, he heard his lord crunching melon seeds, and the corners of her lips curled into a happy smile. Wei Ci asked, "Is there a happy occasion, my lord?" Jiang Pengji smiled and said, "I just heard that Xicheng's princess is finally going to give birth." Wei Ci's expression was surprised. It seemed that he didn't expect Xicheng's princess to not give birth yet. Calculating the time, it should have been more than half a month, right? The timing isn't right. Xicheng's princess was in Chui's concubine. The child in her womb was his posthumous child. His lord wanted to use the mother and child to show her benevolence. Regardless of whether it was Xicheng's princess or the child, nothing could happen to either of them. There was most likely a problem if the child was born so late. Jiang Pingji said, "Who knows? Anyway, I've done my best." Chapter 17:16. Jiang Pingji had an attitude of, "What does it have to do with me whether the Xicheng emperor's concubine dies or not?" But Wei Xi was a little more concerned. He said sincerely, "I hope that the emperor's concubine can give birth safely, and that both mother and daughter are safe. Why? If it's a son, he'll be a hidden danger when he grows up. It's fine if he's grateful, but if he's an ungrateful ingrate, who knows if he'll secretly hold a grudge against you. If anything happens to the Xicheng emperor's concubine, it'll affect your reputation. To sum up, it's best to give birth to a daughter, to stop the thoughts of the old official, and at the same time, to eliminate the hidden danger, and then the Lord will be cleared." Jiang Pingji smiled and placed the melon seeds she peeled with her hands next to his mouth. Wei Xi was stunned for a moment, and only opened his mouth to eat the melon seeds slowly. Unfortunately, his lord was too much. She deliberately touched his lips with her fingertips, and the slow movement of rubbing his lips looked extremely ambiguous. "Zixiao, you're always thinking about me. I don't know what reward I should give you, my lord." Wei Xi's stop was slightly weak. Not only did it not make Jiang Pingji restrain herself, but it also stimulated the urge to take a mile when given an inch. Therefore, someone leaned forward obediently, and like a dragonfly skimming the surface of the water, he left immediately. "How about a reward of my lord's kiss?" Burp, what was that sound? It was the burp of 5 million salted fish, who were maliciously stuffed with dog food by the streamer. Shernan Xiaojia. The streamer is really shameless. How is this a reward for my prince? It's clearly taking advantage of him. Bingla mineral water. This kiss, rounded up, is an exciting boat scene. Jiang Pingji was a miser with a strong possessiveness. Although she often teased Wei Xi in the live stream, most of the time she took advantage of him verbally. She rarely touched him with her hands and feet. It was rare to see such a scene. How could the salted fish not be excited? Gujiqi. I unilaterally announced that the Pengxi couple is completely locked. Tuda Feiqiu. The streamer is as bad as ever. She knows that the emperor is still suffering, but she still openly shows her love. It's simply a critical hit. I wonder how the emperor's son will react when he returns and sees the streamer's recording. Canteen Daffin Auntie. How else can he react? That was heart-wrenching. Previously, the 81st tier female celebrity had torn apart rich kids on Weibo, and the public's opinion of crusading against scumbags was overwhelming. Even so, the young masters still drove luxury cars, lived in mansions, and slept with female celebrities. They were very happy, and were not affected by the outside world at all. In other words, in the eyes of people at his level, the movement of the netizens was nothing more than a splash of water. People waved their keyboards and filled with righteous indignation on the internet. Wasn't it ridiculous to stand up for a prostitute who couldn't even be considered as little six? Hee, what about now? A man who said that giving birth was like taking a dump was now wailing, and giving birth under the watchful eyes of 5 million salted fish from 2 dimensions. The sarcastic salted fish even added that he looked like a white pig that was being slaughtered. Oh, he was probably worse than a white pig waiting to be slaughtered. When people butchered a pig, they would at least let the pig whine before it died. The European emperor's mouth was blocked by the midwife. No matter how painful it was, he could only whimper and swallow all the sounds back into his stomach. Many women who watched the live broadcast expressed that the content of today's live broadcast was extremely comfortable, especially those women who had experienced giving birth. They wished they could grab their husbands and press them in front of the screen for them to see. From pregnancy to childbirth and breastfeeding, the people around them had more or less said similar things, especially the people who were closest to them in bed. The words were unintentional, but the listeners were interested. Pregnant women's emotions were fragile to begin with. The impact of these idle gossip on them was incomprehensible to outsiders. Some women even suffered from postpartum depression because of this, but their closest husbands still made sarcastic remarks on the side. Isn't it just giving birth to a child? The whole family treats you like an ancestor. Why are you still so unreasonable? Postpartum depression? You get depressed so easily. So what if you're depressed? Isn't it just a bad mood? It can also cause death. My mother's living conditions were so bad in that era, but she wasn't depressed. You're eating well, wearing good clothes, and living well now. How are you being unreasonable and depressed just because you gave birth to a son for me? It turned out that postpartum depression could really kill people. If all the men in the world who said such sarcastic remarks could get a half-day tour of ancient childbirth like the European emperor, allowing them to personally experience what it felt like to have a pile of shit, they would probably all shut up. The pain wasn't on them. All of them were heartless. If the pain really hit them, they would naturally learn to respect women. To put it bluntly, since it was so easy for these men's mothers to give birth to them, let their mothers give birth to them. Why did they have to trample on other people's daughters? If they couldn't achieve complete respect, they should learn how to shut up. Looking at the live broadcast, the European emperor, who was struggling and wailing like a pig, was being carried by the midwives to give birth without any dignity. Many salted fish felt a sense of satisfaction. After the satisfaction, there was a hint of disappointment and indignation. They had mixed feelings. Free drink. Don't you find the European emperor's body a little familiar? As for who it looked like, the salted fish couldn't tell. The Xicheng emperor's concubine's appearance had changed a lot from before. In addition, the European emperor's entire face was contorted from the pain. The veins on his forehead were bulging, and half of his face was red and bloodshot. Not to mention the salted fish who had only seen the emperor's concubine a few times. Even the emperor's concubine's mother wouldn't be able to recognize him. This question was like a drop of water thrown into the vast ocean. It dissipated after a few ripples. The salted fish were still laughing and joking. Jiang Pingji tried her best to show off her affection. Only the poor European emperor was still suffering from unbearable pain. It was unknown whether it was because the fetus was too big, the mother's young body, or other reasons. But the birth was exceptionally difficult. Before the European emperor came over, the emperor's concubine had already endured for 14 to 16 hours. After he transmigrated to give birth, he was in pain for more than 10 hours. Soon. Wife, I can see the baby's head. Hearing this, the European emperor, who was in a daze from the pain, seemed to have been injected with a cardiotonic. He grabbed onto whatever he could and exerted force. He felt something slowly slipping out from the place where he was numb from the pain. Every time that thing moved an inch, a wave of intense pain attacked him. It was like a hurricane on the sea hitting a small boat. It was so painful that he felt despair. The midwife hurriedly said, "Wife, exert force. Don't relax your strength, or the little Langjun will be hurt." The European emperor cried and exerted force. "MMP, when I give birth to this little kid, I'll throw him like how Lu Big Ear threw Ado." After an unknown amount of time, he felt his body loosen. Something slid out. The European emperor thought in a daze, "It's finally over." The faint sound of fear in his ears didn't attract his attention. Quickly, "Where's the baby?" Chapter 1717. Child cough cough cough. Where's the child? The European king was so excited that he slapped the bed. This child was the golden baby that he had suffered for a long time, from day to night before he finally gave birth to it. Even if he really wanted to throw the child to the ground and kill him, he had to wait for him to take a closer look before doing so. After working so hard for so long, it would be such a waste if he didn't take a look himself. After holding back his anger, the exhausted European emperor could not help but ask the midwife for the baby the moment he regained his freedom. He was too tired and distracted, so he didn't notice the ugly faces of the midwives and the others. When they heard the European king's request to see the child, the midwives and the others looked embarrassed. Their hands, which were holding the child, were still shaking. It was probably because the child had stayed in the mother's womb for too long. When the child was born, the amniotic fluid was very turbid, and the child's body was also stained with feces. However, this child could be considered lucky. The Empress concubine gave birth just in time. If it had been a few more days, the child would probably have died in the womb. However, wife, do you really want to see it? The midwife's voice trembled slightly. Lucky King blurted out, "What nonsense are you talking about? I asked you to bring the child over, so just do it. Why are you wasting time?" When the midwife heard such vulgar words, the hesitation and sympathy in her heart instantly disappeared. It was as if she had thrown away an unlucky piece of garbage. She couldn't wait to place the child next to the European emperor, so that he could look at it to his heart's content. Lucky King had seen a newborn baby before. He was mentally prepared that the baby would be ugly. However, when he saw the baby in person, he was stunned. There was no other reason. This child did not look like a newborn. His skin was fair and rosy, and his small nose and eyes were very beautiful. Her two little fists were curled up, and her fair and tender appearance was completely different from the daughter of the European emperor's first wife. Didn't they say that newborn babies are ugly? The European emperor looked at the child, as if he was looking at a toy. He poked the child's pouting mouth with his finger. Being good-looking was indeed capricious. The European emperor temporarily forgot about the hatred he had for her not long ago. The midwife wanted to say something but stopped. Her expression was so conflicted that it looked like she had been constipated for many years. She said something against her will. "Perhaps it's because my wife is born beautiful, and the child is growing well in her womb," she wanted to say. "Because this child is a monster." Considering his job and head, he didn't say anything. The European emperor looked at the child, but in his mind, he was thinking about his daughter. The more he looked at it, the more he felt that his daughter was better. Right, is it a boy or a girl? This was a very important question. Not only was the European emperor a scumbag, but he was also a male chauvinist. Didn't you see that his first wife had given birth to a daughter? Although the Qing dynasty had died long ago, their family still had the throne, and the throne to inherit. How could they not have a male child? He was already mentally prepared. If his current wife couldn't give birth to a son, he would find someone who could. As for an illegitimate child, he didn't even consider it. After all, he despised illegitimate children, and would never let such a lowly thing inherit his family property. The midwife did not answer. It wasn't that she didn't want to answer, it was just that she didn't know how to. Useless, Lucky King cursed. The midwife refused to tell him. He knew how to read it himself. The European emperor felt regretful when he untied the baby's swaddling clothes. If only there were mobile phones and WeChat moments in this place. He would definitely take a close-up photo of the child's penis and post it on his WeChat moments. On the other side, Salted Fish in the livestream room had already predicted the outcome. Kwang Xia Moshi. Seeing this, I feel a little sorry for this European emperor. He has been arranged clearly. Sitting on the grave mound appreciating the moon. Transmigration is risky. Lucky King needs to be careful. Those scumbags with criminal records. I advise you to stay away from the live stream room. It would be fine if they didn't get it, but if they were unlucky enough to get a transmigration for half a day, they would most likely be in trouble with Lucky King. Xiao Zhuer. Lucky King is very despicable, but I suddenly feel pity for him. It's really tragic. Salted Fish communicated with the bullet screen. They watched helplessly as Lucky King closed his eyes and touched the prize. First, he untied the child's swaddling clothes, pulled open his legs, lifted his crotch cloth, and reached out to touch. Lucky King touched it and felt that it was smooth between the child's legs. Yes, it didn't look like it was a money-losing product. It was undoubtedly a boy. He felt a sense of relief, as if there was finally an heir to the throne. Lucky King was like a gambler who had found a piece of jade. He felt a little excited, as if he was about to open a peerless piece of jade. He continued touching it. What's this? The structure didn't seem right. He pinched it with his hand and felt a piece of meat that looked like a small sausage, but there were no eggs. No eggs? Lucky King's eyes widened. He wanted to stick his face to the child's body to take a look. He turned the child to the left and right, but there were no eggs. Where are the eggs? Lucky King was shocked. He asked the midwife and the others. Where are the eggs? Where were the most important eggs? Unconvinced, he touched the child's body all over, as if he was trying to find the missing pair of eggs. The midwife thought that he was crazy, so she quickly picked up the frightened and crying child. Her initial disgust for the child was replaced with some sympathy. What a sin! The child was born with a natural castration, and the mother was unreliable. What a poor child! Yes, this child was born with a deformity, and he was naturally castrated. Nowadays, the eunuchs only cut off the eggs, but the child was born without eggs. Wasn't that a natural castration? The midwife thought sympathetically. She hoped that the child would grow up to be a fool. If he was sane, how could he accept this crippled body that could not reproduce and could not have children? Even if he wasn't sick in the head, he would be sick from holding it in. What a sin! The midwife did not know that Lucky King had transmigrated back before he could go crazy. She only saw that the princess of Xichang had fainted from the huge blow. The child in her arms could only be temporarily taken care of by the wet nurse, who also disliked it. What sin? The midwife rolled her eyes at the wet nurse. No matter how bad this child is, he is still a posthumous child of a noble. The wet nurse sneered. What dogsh asterisk T noble? This is retribution. The midwife scolded her in a low voice. You've drunk too much. Is your brain muddled? You dare to say anything? The wet nurse mocked. Why not? How many innocent maidservants did that bastard in Shui order to kill? These maidservants were taking revenge on the ghost babies in their wombs. He wanted to end his line of descendants. And the posthumous child he gave birth to was also a natural castration. The Nanxing women who had been raped and impregnated by the Nanman captives were all victims. In the end, Shui listened to the advice of the sycophant and stubbornly sent men to beat the pregnant women with the Nanman blood out with sticks. That tragic scene was truly infuriating. The wet nurse believed that Shui's posthumous child had become like this because of the innocent souls who had died in vain. The midwife was silent for a long time when she heard this. She could only sigh. After all, this child is innocent. The wet nurse spun the child around in a circle and softly coaxed him, revealing a chilling smile. Of course he's innocent. Chapter 17-18. Xichang Emperor concubine did not remember how long she had slept. When she slowly opened her eyes, she only felt lazy and so sore that she did not want to move. Her cicada-like eyelashes trembled. Her watery eyes were filled with alienation and confusion. She did not know what year and month she was in. The setting sun outside scattered mottled golden shadows in the room. The shadows of the trees outside the window swayed left and right under the autumn wind. The Xichang Emperor concubine listened carefully and could faintly hear the rustling of the leaves and the sound of the wind. The world was silent, as if she was the only person left in the world. She had expended so much energy before falling asleep that the newly awakened Xichang Emperor concubine did not even realize why she was lying there. When she recalled her memories before she fell asleep, she remembered that she had been giving birth before she fainted giving birth. Xichang Emperor concubine was stunned. Her hand under the blanket could not help but touch her much shriveled belly. It felt very soft to the touch. She could pinch a soft lump of flesh with just a slight pinch. Her belly still looked very big. It did not have the slender waist from before pregnancy, but she knew that the feeling of being connected by blood to the child for several months was gone. When the child was still here, her belly had been very tight and hard. Now it was soft to touch. This fact made Xichang Emperor concubine forget the ugly stretch marks on her belly. There was only one thought in her mind: where's the child? Although this child was not what she had hoped for, it could not be denied that the child was the closest existence to her in the world. No matter how unbearable his existence was, he was still the child she had given birth to after being pregnant for a long time. Having such a child was better than having nothing at all. Come. Just as she was about to speak, Xichang Emperor concubine realized that her throat was so dry that it felt like it was on fire. Her desire to drink water was stronger than ever. She endured the discomfort in her throat and tried to use a hoarse voice to call for a servant girl to serve her. Xichang Emperor concubine had woken up at a very coincidental time. The servant girl had gone out to do something, and she had woken up right after. Thus, she had waited for a long time before someone came to her. When the servant girl saw that Xicheng Emperor concubine had woken up, she was so shocked that she almost knocked over the water basin. She hurriedly brought her hot water and called for a doctor. This cup of water seemed to extinguish the fire in her throat. Emperor concubine could not help but let out a comfortable sigh. "Where's the child?" the Empress concubine asked a bit nervously. Thousands of thoughts tangled together, and it was a mess that couldn't be cut off. She hoped that the child would live well, but at the same time, she felt that there was little hope that the child would survive. Before Emperor concubine fainted, she heard the midwife say that she had just opened 3 fingers and was far from the time to give birth. However, at that time, she was in so much pain that she didn't have any strength, so she couldn't give birth. When she woke up from her coma, her stomach was empty, and there was no child crying beside her. The Empress concubine knew what this meant, and felt a bit of despair. Humans were complex creatures. The Empress concubine felt despair for her child's departure, but also faintly let out a sigh of relief. Outsiders all thought that the child was Shui's posthumous child. Only she and her brother knew that the child in her womb was the product of the 2 of them going against human relations. She and her brother were siblings born from the same mother. It was highly likely that the child she gave birth to would be a strange monster. Before Xicheng was destroyed, when the royal family was still at its peak, there was news that an elder emperor concubine and her uncle had gotten pregnant. It was rumored that the child that emperor concubine gave birth to was a 3-legged noseless monster. In the end, the child fell to his death and was hastily buried to cover up this scandal. There were many similar rumors about the royal family. The more Xicheng Empress concubine thought about it, the more terrified she became. If the child was a monster, as the woman who gave birth to the monster, would she be in danger? Would outsiders suspect that this child wasn't Shui's posthumous child, and then investigate that she and her brother had made Shui a cuckold? Even if this cuckold hadn't been intentional, and Hua Yuan had forced them to. But who would believe this if he said it out loud? Due to all sorts of considerations, Xicheng Empress concubine hoped that the child could live and be her companion. At the same time, she hoped that the child wouldn't be a burden to her. From the moment she asked to the servant girl's reply, it had only been a few breaths of time. Countless thoughts flashed through her mind. The Empress concubine's hand under the blanket clenched, and she stared at the servant girl's mouth. The servant girl said, Little husband just drank milk at the wet nurse's place." When it came to how to address the child, the servant girl was a bit conflicted. He was born castrated. The midwife said that this kind of child could never be found in a lifetime. He wasn't male or female. Even the way to address him was a problem. The servant girl thought bitterly. He had such a crippled body, yet he was so beautiful. Who knew how much trouble and suffering he would cause in the future? In this world, beautiful women weren't the only ones who attracted competition. Beautiful men were also prey in the eyes of the strong. He was a cripple who was born castrated. He was neither a man nor a woman. To a certain extent, his existence was a kind of magic. He was good-looking, so he was bound to attract those perverts who liked to seek novelty. Sigh. If only the little husband was a girl through and through, with his status as Shui's posthumous child, and his status as a non-threatening daughter. Perhaps the Duke of Lanting would be willing to favor him. With the protection of a golden thigh, even if he was a beauty that could bring disaster to a country, the little husband would still be able to grow up in peace. It was a pity he was born castrated. The servant girl's answer was beyond the Empress concubine's expectations. Because she was too shocked, she overlooked the flash of embarrassment on the servant girl's face. "Quick, bring the child over. Let me see him." The good news temporarily covered the confusion in her heart. She clearly remembered that she fainted from the pain and couldn't continue giving birth. Then, how did this difficult birth of a child go smoothly? This question was temporarily suppressed. She waited so long for the child that her neck grew long. The servant girl's eyes revealed astonishment. She asked, "Wife, you don't remember?" The Empress concubine asked, "Remember what?" the servant girl said. You gave birth and saw the little husband once, but you didn't like him very much. Not liking was a rather tactful explanation. When she heard the servant girl in the delivery room describe it, the Empress concubine was scared silly by the child's disability. She kept touching the child's side, turning the child over and over to find him. She crazily muttered, "Where did my son's eggs go? How could a newborn child endure this kind of torment?" As a mother, she clearly wanted to kill her son. The Empress concubine didn't have any impression of the servant girl's words. She didn't even have the memory of how she gave birth. That's my son. How could I not like him? Having a man in one fell swoop, the Empress concubine had someone to rely on for the rest of her life. From the looks of it, he had all 4 limbs, thank the heavens. He indeed had all 4 limbs, but unfortunately, there was something wrong with his 5th limb. The servant girl was suspicious, but still nervously carried the child over. Under the servant girl's despairing gaze, the Empress concubine still discovered the abnormality of this child. Looking at the child's abnormal body, her originally rosy face turned completely white. Chapter 17:19. The scene the servant girl was worried about did not happen. Emperor concubine's complexion was not good, but she was not crazy enough to do anything to the child. He was born like this. Emperor concubine's expression was dispirited, and there was a hint of fear and unease. Unfortunately, the servant girl did not notice. The servant girl lowered her head in fear. Yes, the little husband was born like this. What are the rumors outside? Emperor concubine smiled bitterly. I'm afraid they all think. She swallowed her words, not daring to continue. Outsiders were probably guessing that the child's father was not Shui. Shui was dead, and so was Hua Yuan. If the former died, there would be no blood test. If the latter died, there would be one less person who knew. Now the only person who knew was her royal brother. If her royal brother was gone, would she be able to keep this secret for the rest of her life? The moment this evil thought appeared, it took over her mind in a domineering manner, and she could not get rid of it. The servant girl did not know what Emperor concubine was thinking. The two of them were like chickens talking to ducks, yet they could connect seamlessly. Wife, don't be sad. There are indeed some unpleasant words outside, but as long as Duke Lanting does not speak, no one can hurt you and the little husband. Emperor concubine smiled bitterly. Don't say nice things to comfort me. The servant girl sympathized with Emperor concubine. She'd heard that she was a beauty that could topple cities, and had a noble family and bloodline. In the end, Shui had taken her away, and reduced her to her current state. She could not help but say, "This servant is not trying to comfort you, wife. The rumors outside say that the little husband's body is damaged because the woman and baby from back then came for revenge. Why do you put the blame on yourself?" Emperor concubine, who was still sad and worried about the future. What? What revenge? Emperor concubine could not keep up with the servant girl's pace. She realized in hindsight that she and the servant girl were not talking about the same thing. Her tense heart slowly fell to the ground, and the lingering sense of danger receded like the tide. It seemed that giving birth to a naturally castrated son did not cause anyone to suspect the child's past. It was her own guilty conscience. Emperor concubine beat around the bush, and finally got the information she wanted from the servant girl. As it turned out, it was rumored in the outside world that the child's natural castration was the revenge of those women, children, and babies who had died in vain. They were the ones who had caused Shui to have no descendants. From start to finish, the Empress concubine and the Xichang prince had nothing to do with it. The unlucky, and was once again the scapegoat. The maidservant saw that the Xichang emperor concubine was deep in thought, and thought that she was still conflicted. She tried to comfort her. Without waiting for her to finish, the Empress concubine looked at the child's white and delicate little face and softly said, "There's nothing bad about it." The maid was stunned. "Huh?" The Empress concubine said, "This child is Duke Duoshi's posthumous son, and Duke Duoshi's death is related to Duke Lanting. I'll say something disrespectful, but Duke Lanting is the child's father's murderer. No matter how broad-minded Duke Lanting was, She still held a grudge against this child. Now that the child's body was crippled, he could not continue the Duke of Duoshi's family line. The Duke of Lanting had one less hidden danger. On account of this meager friendship, perhaps the Lanting Guild would be willing to treat him leniently and take care of him. In this way, we will have someone to rely on for the rest of our lives. After all, she was the noble Empress concubine of the royal family. Her analysis made sense. From the Empress concubine's point of view, a naturally castrated boy who could not continue the family line was almost the same as a girl. To the Duke of Lanting, such a child was indeed less threatening. Moreover, because the child was crippled, perhaps he could use this to gain the sympathy and care of others. How could the maid have such knowledge? The Empress concubine's analysis made sense. She felt that what the Empress concubine said was the truth. Little did she know that Jiang Pingji did not care about the child at all. If the child had not been born by the lucky emperor, why would she pay attention to him? The number of enemies who had died by her hands was endless. Many of them had wives and children, such as the widow and children of the feudal Lord Su Bei. If she feared these children just because she was the child's father's murderer, even if she had 24 hours a day, it would not be enough. The Empress concubine's analysis seemed logical, but in Jiang Pingji's eyes, it was an awkward joke. They were just a few brats. She did not even care about their fathers, so why would she fear a few hairless ones? In comparison, she was even more curious about the lucky emperor. Pepsi Cola. 1 word, super miserable. 2 words, super invincible miserable. The salted fish's style of talking was still the same as before, such as the number that could never be correct. How miserable is he? Jiang Pingji drank water and ate melon seeds while chatting with the salted fishes. The documents at hand were almost finished, so Wei Ci and the others could not say that Jiang Pingji was slacking off. Pepsi Cola. His 5th limb is crippled. They say it's a mental illness. He can't lift it no matter what. Last night, he was at the capital's private clubhouse again. It was the kind that was not very good. It was very messy. That guy used to be very coquettish, but yesterday he couldn't lift it no matter what. Not only could he not lift it, but he also had a psychological trauma towards women. Once touched, he vomited as if he had taken laxatives. Coca-Cola. And this news content. I did not expect you to be such a Pepsi Cola. The group of salted fishes who had moved their stools to listen to the gossips in their circle also exploded. The whole screen was filled with the phrase, I did not expect you to be such a Pepsi Cola. If he was not a kindred spirit, how could he know so clearly? Pepsi Cola panicked and hurriedly explained. Pepsi Cola. Everyone, don't make wild guesses. Can't you see that I have the ID Fat Otaku Cola? If Pepsi Cola shares plummeted because of me, I'm really afraid that I will be retaliated against when I go out. The source of the news is reliable, but I was not there. It was broadcasted by my childhood friend. My childhood friend is also a little playful, but he has a sense of propriety. He has been inspired by the streamer for the past 2 years, and has turned over a new leaf. It is true that he has turned over a new leaf, but he still retains his previous information channels. That is why he is so well informed. The salted fishes continued to munch on melon seeds, and listen to the big shots in the circle deliver fresh gossip to them. Tudafetio. He can't lift it, and he has a psychological trauma towards women. This is a sign of a strong man chastising. Xiaopai Hotel. How is this considered miserable? He can't harmonize his yin and yang, but he can develop a new position to bathe in blood and feces with others. Maybe he will be infatuated and open the door to a new world. From then on, he will be out of control and will no longer rape innocent women. Oh Shishu. But if that is the case, the innocent man will be in danger. The 5 million salted fishes looked at the bullet screen in silence for a long time. Blind student, you have discovered a point. The angle of this question was indeed too tricky. Jiang Pingji silently munched on melon seeds. The system's operation. Chapter 1720. Was it a coincidence that these lucky emperors were selected? Not necessarily. Based on her previous analysis, Jiang Pingji was sure that there must be a shady plot that no one knew about. The identity of each lucky emperor, and the timing of their transmigration were full of calculations, as if they were playing a big game of chess. If the old chief had not personally verified that the new system in the god-slaying saber was harmless to her, Jiang Pingji would have killed it long ago. Whether it was the main system that was wandering outside, or the new system that had no sense of existence, Jiang Pingji did not let down her guard. Needless to say, it had not caused trouble all these years, not because it had turned over a new leaf, but because it was waiting for a chance to overthrow Jiang Pingji and make her die a tragic death. As long as Jiang Pingji let down her guard, she would be greeted with a thunderous attack. The latter's new system was a little more confusing. She could tell from the number of lucky streamers the system had chosen that the system's stance and attitude did not conflict with hers. The system's actions also followed some unknown principles, so the two of them got along quite well. The comfortable life did not make Jiang Pingji let down her guard. She was always on guard. Regardless of whether it was the new system or the sliced system, they both had powers beyond common sense. They were uncontrollable anomalies. Who knew if it would suddenly dig a big hole for her one day? She still had to be on guard, but it did not stop Jiang Pingji from being curious about the new system. Which system would be so bored as to teach a scumbag a lesson, and specially let him transmigrate to experience the joy of having a child, leaving a psychological scar that he could not lift the saber? Jiang Pingji believed that the system would not do meaningless things, but no matter how she thought about it, she did not know what benefits it would bring. Was it just because the new system could not stand the sight of scumbags? Or perhaps, the scumbag had a grudge with the system in his previous life? Jiang Pingji's thoughts wandered, but she did not know where they went. The old chief happened to be playing games in the streaming room. He heard Jiang Pingji's mutterings. He fought one against 3 opponents who were so weak that they were scratching their feet, while he expressionlessly ignored his teammates, who were lying on the ground, and cheered for her. He freed one hand to send a message to Jiang Pingji. You Abba. If you dare to touch that knife, I will dare to touch you. Jiang Xiaojiao, are you touched? Even though the old chief was often online, and often watched the streaming room, Jiang Pingji hardly spoke to him. They each did their own things. Even though they were acquaintances, the relationship between them was limited to being a superior and a subordinate. Jiang Pingji respected and trusted her, but she did not want a child who had not been weaned to stick to her all day long. Unless there was something she couldn't figure out, she would only take the initiative to look for the old general. The number of times that the old general would take the initiative to talk to her could be counted on one hand. What's that? Jiang Pingji looked at the god-slaying sword on her waist, and was suddenly stunned. According to the information leaked by a certain part of the system, this god-slaying saber should be the key to defeating the system itself. It was extremely lethal to the system. The mysterious person who had delivered the god-slaying sword to Jiang Pingji, the dimensional patrol merchant mentioned by the system, had left a note saying that the sword had been forged for Jiang Pingji by her so-called father. Even though Jiang Pingji still did not know who this father was, the news was already messy enough, and now the old chief had jumped in to interfere. No matter how good Jiang Pingji's analytical skills were, she was still confused. Your Abba. I've told you before that your mission is to use this god-slaying saber to kill the heavenly brain. This is a training mission given to you by the Federation. You've done well all these years. The heavenly brain has been defeated by you several times. You've probably also discovered that there's a spiritual life form similar to the heavenly brain inside this sword. Or rather, it's a seed that relies on plundering the heavenly brain's energy to develop and grow. Jiang Pingji asked the old general, a spiritual life form similar to the heavenly brain? Do you know it? If it were in the past, the old general would have answered vaguely, and Jiang Pingji would have tactfully stopped asking questions. But today was different. The old general knew Jiang Pingji's temperament very well. If he did not dispel her suspicions, Jiang Pingji might really kill the little fellow inside the god-slaying sword when she was not paying attention. Jiang Pingji was never a person who would rear a tiger to invite calamity. Once she confirmed that someone was harmful to her, she would take action without warning. She would not give the person a chance to turn the tables. Taking advantage of a person's illness She had no qualms about using underhanded tactics. You Abba. The company will give me a rather difficult task in 2 days. I probably won't be able to contact you for some time. To prevent you from attacking the little fellow inside the god-slaying sword when I'm not around, I'm informing you first. This is not only my personal request, but also the Federation's attitude. The little fellow inside the sword is of great importance to the Federation. Jiang Pengji furrowed her brows. She did not expect things to become so complicated. A spiritual life form similar to the heavenly brain. I understand. Jiang Pengji stopped thinking about studying the god-slaying sword and asked, I'll wait for you to come back before dealing with the god-slaying sword. How long will you be gone for? I'm sure that as the process of conquering the world accelerates, the main system will become more and more impatient. I don't know when it will attack me, but I have a feeling that that day is not far away. After all, the main system is the culprit behind the heavenly brain disaster. I can't guarantee that I can arrest it and bring it to justice by myself. It was true that Jiang Pengji had the god-slaying sword, but her body was not original. She could not guarantee that she would be able to deal with a supernatural spiritual life form like the main system. Moreover, the people around her were all ordinary people who did not have the ability to protect themselves. She was not afraid of the main system's schemes, but she could not guarantee that others would not be targeted. Regarding this concern, the old commander was able to reassure her. You Abba. Most of the confidants around you are related to the direction of the history of this plane world. If any one of them is targeted by the main system, the plane's consciousness will immediately discover its exact whereabouts. When that time comes, will you still need to do anything? You are not the only one who has their eyes on the main system. As far as I know, the merchant patrolling the plane that you mentioned before is also one of them. He has the responsibility of maintaining the normal operation of the plane. The existence of the main system is like a parasite attached to the plane. It is impossible not to get rid of it. If the main system's true identity is exposed, it will not have to face Jiang Pengji with the god-slaying sword, but the merchant patrolling the plane. The former can still plot a few rounds and struggle a little, but the latter can only lie flat and wait to be trampled on. No matter how stupid the main system is, it will not make such a move. It is seeking its own death. Hearing the old chief say this, Jiang Pengji was relieved. Most of them? Jiang Pengji frowned. Old chief, do you mean that there is still a possibility of the remaining few being exploited? According to the original historical analysis, those who should have died in Jiang Pengji's hands should not have this kind of luck. In other words, they are also the easiest targets for the system to target. You Abba. That's not necessarily true. After all, a person's luck is not fixed. Because of the change of fate, some people's luck is connected to you, and they are also immune from the sky's brain's persecution. Of course, if the person's fate was targeted before the change, it is a different story. I think you have always known who it is. Let's not talk about it. My teammates are too weak. If I get distracted again, I will lose this game. In reality, the old chief's beautiful fingers danced on the keyboard. As he exited the streaming room, he killed the last person with half of his HP. Chapter 1721. If possible, the old chief didn't want to have any contact with this mysterious man. According to the old chief's investigation, this man was directly related to the catastrophe of Tianbao 2,000 years ago, and he was a direct participant in that incident. She didn't want to find out how this old man could live for 2,000 years, but one thing was for sure. This man who claimed to be the ancestor of the Jiang family had terrifying abilities. If not for that, how could the Federation give in to Jiang Pengji, the last bloodline of the Jiang family, and allow her to enter the upper echelons? The direct descendants of the Jiang family were destroyed, and the family was defeated. Of course, that was the main reason. There was also a secondary reason. The upper echelons of the Federation watched coldly from the sidelines, and the aristocratic families took advantage of the situation to divide up the Jiang family's thousands of years of history. The man claimed to be the ancestor of the Jiang family, and his appearance shocked the entire upper echelons of the Federation. The old chief wasn't very interested in the history of his ancestors, but he knew that this man participated in the reconstruction of the Federation after the rebellion of Tianbao. He helped the Federation create a new Tianbao network to replace the original rebellious Tianbao. If not for that, human civilization, which relied heavily on Tianbao in all aspects of life and work, would have regressed many years due to Tianbao's betrayal, and would have been annexed by the surrounding alien alliances. After the reconstruction, the man disappeared without a trace. The Jiang family that he inherited was handed over to his cousin. There were few records about him in the Federation, but the old chief, as a former upper echelon of the Federation, had the authority to read the man's information. No one would have thought that this man was so cunning that he actually gave the new Tianbao permission during the reconstruction. In the entire human alliance, even the marshal's authority was one level lower than his. The old chief still remembered what the man's first words were when he appeared. "I won't care about your actions against the Jiang family in the past, but if anyone dares to do anything in the future, don't blame me for being rude." The old chief was still the head of the army back then, and as the leader of the frontline combat army, her words had quite a lot of weight. Therefore, when she heard such an arrogant warning, she sneered and asked, "Why?" The man didn't speak, but the scene was dead silent. That was because a virtual projection appeared next to the man, and the upper echelons present were no strangers to this person. When the Tianbao disaster broke out, this person replaced the original Tianbao and supported the entire Tianbao network. He was the hero who ensured the normal economic and social operation of the human alliance. The Tianyu network had been operating normally for the past 2,000 years. However, with the precedent of the previous Sky Brain, the upper echelons of the Federation still did not trust this new Sky Brain. This was because this Sky Brain had its own consciousness. As an existence that spanned across the entire Federation, its authority, from a certain perspective, was above the entire Federation. Once the human alliance became arrogant and wanted to do things like its predecessor, the human alliance would be in a very passive position. The best outcome would be a repeat of the brain disaster of the past. That was a catastrophe that caused the entire human civilization to stagnate. In order to get rid of this awkward situation, the Federation had never stopped researching and developing the new heavenly brain. Unfortunately, there seemed to be a huge gap between the artificial intelligence and the two heavenly brains. They could not be replaced. This was awkward. Under normal circumstances, in order to avoid such awkwardness, the upper echelons of the Federation would not disturb the Sky Brain unless it was absolutely necessary. The heavenly brain codenamed King didn't seem to like humans too much either. Every day, other than maintaining the operation of the Tianyu network, he would go to the virtual network to disguise himself as all sorts of people. He was a shut-in who would not appear unless there was something important. The old commander had been the commander of the army for many years. The number of times he had seen the heavenly brain take on a human form could be counted on one hand. Now the shut-in heavenly brain had actually appeared beside the ancestor of the Jiang clan. It was obvious that he was protecting the other party, which made the faces of all the upper echelons darken. "Are you trying to threaten us with the entire Federation?" The man's eyes were indifferent. The Jiang clan has fallen to this state because they brought it upon themselves. You're just adding insult to injury. You're not the main culprit. I'm not an unreasonable person. If the descendants don't live up to expectations, then let the Jiang clan be defeated. However, leave a way out. Don't be so ruthless. If you really push people too far, what does your life and death have to do with me? The old commander could not help but mock. The descendants of the Jiang clan have not wasted their family business. You, as their ancestor, did not come forward to restrain them. Now you're trying to show off your power in front of us? The Jiang clan had long focused on business. After the power of the direct descendants fell into the hands of the side branches, the entire family's business continued to decline. It was not that the Federation did not want to help. If the Jiang clan were to be finished, it was unknown how many people's jobs would be affected. The economic losses to the entire Federation would be immeasurable. However, although the Federation wanted to help, the Jiang clan still could not withstand the attacks of their opponents. If the ancestors of the Jiang clan were so awe-inspiring, they would have appeared a few hundred years ago, when the Jiang clan's power was still at its peak. At the very least, they could save the unfortunate direct descendants of the Jiang clan. Now they jumped out to protect the descendants. This belated shot was really too far off. The man was rebuked, but he was not angry. He only said indifferently, "The direct descendants of the Jiang clan are the only ones who can kill the former Sky Brain." The senior officials, they all knew that the Jiang clan's defeat was related to the former Sky Brain's comeback. They were having a headache because of this matter. However, the former Sky Brain's identity was special. They could not even find a trace of it, let alone destroy it. The Jiang clan's defeat was only a warning to the senior officials of the Federation. It was back. Just as everyone was at their wits' end, the ancestors of the Jiang clan told them that the direct descendants of the Jiang clan were the only ones who could kill the Sky Brain. Why? The man said, "Because it's an ancestral ability that the direct descendants of the Jiang clan can only control after their genes have been awakened." The current power system of the Federation was based on developing the limits of the human body. The key lay in the genes. Under normal circumstances, the genes of ordinary people would evolve with the development of inheritance from generation to generation. However, some geniuses could condense hundreds or even thousands of years of evolution into a few short years. This was genetic unlocking, completely unlocking the shackles and exploding the limits of the human body. However, to this day, no one could answer how many genetic locks there were. Perhaps the end was the dream of eternal life. The man in front of them had indeed existed for more than 2,000 years. Perhaps he had already grasped the secret of eternal life here. The awakening the man mentioned was similar to genetic unlocking to a certain extent, but also different. In essence, the latter was to develop the potential of the body's existence, while the former was to trace the source and return to ancestral inheritance. The old chief had indeed heard that the Jiang clan had existed since ancient times. These ancient clans always had a foundation that outsiders could not imagine. Chapter 1722. The former Sky Brain's crazy revenge on the direct descendants of the Jiang family was naturally not for the sake of showing off. He had an ulterior motive. The senior officials were speechless. After a long time, someone said something that everyone was worried about. The direct descendants of the Jiang family seemed to have no one left. It was not seem. There was no one left at all. However, shouldn't the man in front of them, who claimed to be the ancestor of the Jiang family, have a purer bloodline? The man seemed to have the ability to read minds, and saw through the thoughts of the old chief at a glance. He said, "Due to some special circumstances, I don't have this ability, but there is still one direct descendant of the Jiang family alive." The federal marshal asked him, "Tell me your purpose?" The man said, "She will come back to reorganize the Jiang family. I'm here to warn you not to do anything stupid." Apart from a few who had no foundation and climbed up purely through meritorious deeds, the rest of the military and political higher-ups present were inseparable from the major forces of the Federation. The Jiang family was too big a cake. How could those forces not be jealous and take the opportunity to get a share? From this point of view, they were opposing the only remaining direct descendants of the Jiang family. In order to prevent the other party from taking revenge after she grew up, it was normal to kill her in the cradle while she was still weak. "Who is this person?" The man said bluntly. "I don't feel at ease leaving her to you." The marshal said, "She is so important that the Federation will devote all its resources to nurture her." "Sir, don't doubt our intentions." The man said, "A flower growing in a greenhouse is destined to be unable to withstand the wind and rain. The Jiang family will not usher in a new life in her hands." Everyone could not help but twitch the corners of their mouths when they heard this. The marshal said, "Actually, I have an idea. It was very dangerous to have only one direct descendant left." From what the man said, it seemed like he planned to train the other party to death. If such a precious treasure was lost, How would the Federation deal with the second sky brain disaster? Why not leave some genetic samples or something? If there was really any loss, they could still make a clone. The man said coldly, "It's best not to have such thoughts." Strictly speaking, the Jiang family's collateral descendants also had the Jiang family's bloodline and genes, but they could not awaken their ancestors' abilities. Naturally, there was a certain inside story. If they tried to artificially interfere with reproduction, or even gene duplication, the final result would be shooting themselves in the foot. In short, the Jiang clan's direct descendant only had this one precious egg left. The marshal felt a little awkward when he was rebutted. He could not help but mutter to himself, "These families that have been passed down from ancient times are really troublesome. The secrets they have are really more concentrated than the sea of stars, and their tricks are one after another. Even an old sow wearing a bra isn't so complicated. In that case, sir, you should at least reveal a little bit of the other party's identity. We won't disturb you, but we must protect you secretly." The man said, "When she comes of age, if she's still alive, I'll secretly arrange for her to turn over a new leaf." The marshal's heart trembled. "If you can't," the man said, "the weak don't deserve to live. If you can't even survive a trial of this level, you'll die at the hands of the sky brain sooner or later." The higher-ups. They roughly understood why the man did not pursue the matter of Jiang Shi's previous suppression. His heart was indeed hard. However, the old chief felt that this man was very suspicious. He refused to hand over the whereabouts of the Jiang family's lineal descendants mostly because he didn't trust him, not because of the ridiculous, "the weak don't deserve to live." Naturally, there were also people who did not believe it, and secretly investigated. However, the highest authority of the sky brain was in the hands of the man. No matter how powerful the higher-ups of the Federation were, they could not defeat the all-powerful sky brain. The news of the Jiang family's lineal descendants had been perfectly hidden. The higher-ups waited patiently for many years, until Jiang Pingji was transferred from the genetic warrior sequence to the 7th Army. Only then did the man announce Jiang Pingji's identity. Knowing this result, the higher-ups were stunned. No one would have thought that the real Jiang family's lineal descendants would be in the genetic warrior training camp, where the survival rate was the lowest. Looking at her resume again, the records of dozens of extremely difficult missions made people break out in a cold sweat. Even through words, they could imagine what she had experienced all these years. If her luck had been a little worse, it would have been game over. The man was really her ancestor. Isn't it not too good to go to the 7th Army? The marshal did not agree very much. After all, the 7th Army was a frontline combat army. Its mortality rate was no lower than that of the genetic warrior training camp. The man asked in return, "Then let her go to the logistics unit?" The marshal was silent. Since the plan was to let the Jiang family's lineal descendants reorganize the Jiang family, it meant that the power of the Jiang family would eventually fall into the hands of this lineal descendant. How could an outstanding family head suppress demons, ghosts, demons, and monsters if he didn't have the ability? If she really went to the logistics unit, her future would not be very good. Except for the 7th Army, the other corps are not suitable. The marshal was speechless. He felt that the 7th Army was not good either. The 7th Army was a frontline combat army. The man did not intend to be Jiang Pingji's backer. This meant that Jiang Pingji could only enter the 7th Army from the bottom of the fierce competition. Jiang Pingji could only rely on her experience as a genetic warrior. If a bottom-level warrior wanted to be promoted, he either had to rely on military merits or experience. The latter required time, and the former required bloodshed. Bloodshed meant danger and even sacrifice. To be honest, it was the first time he saw such a cold, heartless, and stubborn ancestor. Other ancestors worried that they did not give enough care to the younger generation, but this one was worried that the younger generation would not die fast enough. Fortunately, Jiang Pingji stepped on the enemy's corpses and fought her way up from the 7th Army with military merits. She showed the excellence that a lineal descendant of an ancient family should have. Unfortunately, at this time, there were unexpected complications. As the commander of the 7th Army, The old chief's body had an untreatable genetic disease. His mental brain was gradually withering. After persisting for several years, he had to retire. When she retired, she naturally had to recommend a suitable successor. The old chief chose Jiang Pingji. This result was unanimously opposed by the marshal and several other commanders. I need a reason. The old chief's face was a little dark. It was not easy to groom a successor, and her body did not allow her to continue to delay. If Jiang Pingji was rejected, the marshal and the other commanders could only recommend a suitable candidate. The person who was reselected might not be more suitable than Jiang Pingji. You rejected her because of her identity? Everyone remained silent, which was equivalent to a tacit agreement. They indeed needed Jiang Pingji, but they could not let her enter the real top ranks. The man held the highest authority in the heavenly brain, and Jiang Pingji might inherit this authority from the man in the future. She was already in danger, and if she was allowed to come into contact with the core military authority Sai, once she took over the position of the commander of the army, the potential risks were too great. No one could afford to take this risk. The timing of that man's appearance is too sensitive. Jiang Pingji has been in the 7th Army for so many years, and her wings are gradually growing. Coincidentally, you fell sick at this time and had to retire. And the person you recommended is Jiang Pingji. Don't you think it's too much of a coincidence? The atmosphere was filled with the smell of conspiracy. Under the old chief's unyielding insistence, everyone took a step back and gave Jiang Pingji a chance, but she had to pass a lot of tests. It was during this period that Jiang Pingji's mission inexplicably became heavier, and the danger level soared. Chapter 1723. After all, she was the successor personally chosen by the old chief. Jiang Pingji had gone through many trials and tribulations. However, to avoid alienating Jiang Pingji from the Federation, these things were not made clear to her. The old chief did not like the utilitarian practices of the Federation, but he could understand those old fellows who were so worried about the Federation that even hair tonic could not save them. If there was anything to blame, it could only be blamed for the trauma left by the encephalopathy disaster 2,000 years ago. It caused the Human Federation, which was originally at the pinnacle of interstellar civilization, to fall apart and almost fall into a state of eternal damnation. Because of this, it suffered 2,000 years of war, more than 2,000 years, during which there was less than 100 years of true peace. Because of the encephalopathy disaster, the development of the Human Federation, in all aspects, had regressed by nearly 1,000 years. Countless secrets had been leaked to the alien races, who had become enemies with the Federation. The war had been going on since that year, and it had also gone through hundreds of years of darkness. A few galaxies had even been ruled by the alien races several times, and in the end, it was through countless sacrifices that they had taken back. It was impossible to estimate how many people had been sacrificed for the Human Federation to be able to stand up again from the ruins. Not to mention the old chief, even Jiang Pingji herself would most likely choose to understand. The soldiers trained by the Federation had the consciousness of sacrificing everything for the Federation, not to mention that Jiang Pingji was a genetic warrior. As long as it was an order from the Federation, as long as it was for peace, any sacrifice would be worth it. Jiang Pingji usually looked cold, but in fact, her loyalty to the Federation was incomparable to that of many soldiers born in the Federation. For a time, the old chief did not understand why that man would send the only direct bloodline of the Jiang family to be a genetic warrior. One had to know that if the Federation really fell out with men, Jiang Pingji's position would always be with the Federation. She would even be the Federation's weapon against men. Who cared if he was an ancestor of the Jiang family? Jiang Pingji would only believe that she was an orphan raised by the Federation. Anyone who did the slightest harm to the Federation, regardless of whether they were close or distant, would be her enemy. The old chief deeply suspected that either the ancestor of the Jiang family had a deep hatred for the Jiang family, which was why he was tormenting the only direct bloodline of the Jiang family, or he was his own ancestor, dedicated to playing with his own descendants. Wasn't Jiang Pingji a typical example? The genetic warrior project sounded quite reliable, but in reality, it was a forbidden experiment prohibited by the laws of the Interstellar Alliance. To put it bluntly, this was an experiment that used technology to forcefully stimulate the human body's potential. In a short period of time, a batch of powerful combat power could be produced. They could perfectly carry out those shady missions, assassinations, undercover spies, stealing secrets. Since it was called a taboo, the meaning behind it was naturally not that simple. According to the secret statistics of the Federation military, 90% of those who successfully graduated from the genetic warrior training camp died during their missions, and the remaining 10% died on their sickbeds at a young age. As far as the old chief knew, the average lifespan of a genetic warrior was around 40. One had to know that the average lifespan of an ordinary person in the Federation was around 250 years, with a small number of experts able to live up to 500 years. It was not without reason that the Genetic Warrior Project was listed as a taboo. This matter was exposed by the talkative media, and the federal military was forced to stop the plan. In fact, even without the interference of public opinion, this plan would have been stopped in the short term. Why? It wasn't that the higher-ups of the Federation found their conscience. Those old men, including the old chief himself, had no conscience at all. The reason they decided to stop this accelerated plan was because the Federation had been at war for 2,000 years and had fought against almost every alien race that could be named. Their position in the galaxy was gradually stabilized, and there were fewer wars. Naturally, the genetic warriors did not need to continue sacrificing themselves. At this time, it was revealed that the former Sky Brain was making a comeback. The fact that the direct descendants of the Jiang family were almost completely annihilated set off alarm bells for the higher-ups. Their first reaction was that the Sky Brain was provoking and threatening them, reminding them of the pain of the past 2,000 years. As long as the Sky Brain did not die, the Federation would not be able to welcome peace, and the unavoidable sacrifices would continue to increase. Jiang Pingji and the old chief had the same thoughts. Those who cause chaos in our clan will be punished, regardless of the alien races, the Sky Brain, or the ancestors of the Jiang family. If they came, they would kill them. The higher-ups of the Federation opposed Jiang Pingji as the leader of the 7th Corps. Apart from the Jiang family's ancestors and the Sky Brain's authority, another key factor was that Jiang Pingji was a genetic warrior. Even if she was always alive and kicking, and all her genetic values were in a strong state, no one knew if the hidden dangers of forcefully unlocking the gene lock would erupt. Pushing her to the position was too risky for the Federation. Of course, after Jiang Pingji passed the test, the Marshal and the other leaders of the Corps could only pinch their noses and accept it. Thinking of this, the old chief could not help but show a trace of mockery. Those old fellows would never have thought that Jiang Pingji would not only become the leader of the 7th Corps, but also a strong competitor for the position of the next Marshal. Just thinking of this situation made the old chief want to laugh. Those old foxes of the Federation were really shrewd. Relying on Jiang Pingji's loyalty to the Federation, they dared to use this plan to take back the authority of the Sky Brain from the ancestors of the Jiang family through Jiang Pingji. No matter what, the final beneficiary would be the Federation, and Jiang Pingji herself was indeed the most suitable candidate for the marshal position. The ancestors of the Jiang family had schemed for so long, but in the end, they still ended up benefiting the Federation. Phew! The old chief leaned back and crossed his legs on the computer table. He stared at the screen calmly. Indeed, it's better to retire. It was really not human to deal with those old foxes, who only had the Federation in their minds. So what if they were the leaders of the Corps? To put it bluntly, it was a deceptive job with a salary and benefits that could not be compared to the workload. She had to worry about selling noodles, earn money from selling cabbages, wake up earlier than chickens, sleep later than dogs, eat worse than pigs, work more than donkeys, and her annual salary was less than that of a star acting in a movie. The job was risky, and there was the risk of being sacrificed at any time. It was difficult to find a job after retiring, According to her, why did Jiang Pingji return to the Federation? She might as well hug her beloved husband, live shamelessly in front of the emperor, and beat her children when she had nothing better to do. What a beautiful life. Wasn't it better than being a slave for the Federation? If Jiang Pingji knew what the old chief was thinking, she would probably sternly lecture him for his improper thinking. Beep, beep, beep. The old chief complained as he finished a cigarette. The ancestors of the Jiang family, who had disappeared for a long time, finally replied to her. What's the matter? The two words were cold, and even a punctuation mark was so buckling and searching. Jiang Xiaojiu is probably going to close the net soon. Do you really intend to let her face the sky brain alone? Chapter 1724. More importantly, you said you had a way to save my son, so I gave you that good-for-nothing snack, but you turned around and took it to build a blade. Now Jiang Xiaojiu, that bastard, is suspicious of Azi and the god-slaying saber. Did I really owe the two of you in my previous life? The other party said. She knows her limits. Treasuring words like gold. Of course I know she knows what she's doing. After all, she's my half-disciple. She was still better than you, the so-called ancestor and adoptive father, who had been tricking her the most these years. I suspect that Jiang Xiaojiu already knows where the heavenly brain's main body is residing. Why don't you personally make a trip to collect it, so that Jiang Xiaojiu doesn't have to take risks? No matter what, she's the only remaining treasure of your Jiang clan. It's a pity that she's dead. She can. Subtext. If she couldn't even handle this, how could she ascend to the position of marshal? Hee, it's better to wash up and sleep early. Stop daydreaming. The old chief sighed. Once again, he pitted Jiang Pingji for meeting such an unreliable and cold person. I have another question. Ask. The old general threw away the cigarette, and took out another one. She did not really like the smell of tobacco, but she would occasionally smoke a couple of cigarettes when she was upset. When she was still the commander of the army, she would smoke a few packs of cigarettes a day whenever the pressure of war was high. After retiring from the army, she slowly quit and could be considered an old smoker. Is there anything special about that plane? Although they hadn't had much contact, the old commander knew that this ancestor of the Jiang clan had a profound background and superb strength. If he were to get serious, he would definitely be able to challenge the escaping heavenly brain alone. But he had handed this heavy responsibility to Jiang Pingji. Wasn't this giving up what was close at hand for what was far away? After much thought, the only conjecture he had was that the dimension Jiang Pingji was currently in had a special significance. That was why Jiang Pingji had to transmigrate twice to fight for the throne. Luck. The other party spoke bluntly, with no intention of hiding anything. Luck. What do you mean? After a while, the other party sent a message. The Federation's luck has run out. Looking at these words, the old general's fingers that were holding the cigarette trembled, and the ashes fell onto the table without him noticing. Impossible. How could his luck have run out? In the past 100 years, the Federation had won at least 90% of the external defense wars, forcibly raising its position in the interstellar alliance through the war. Today's prosperity is just the final radiance of a setting sun. In a few years, the Providence would be completely exhausted, and the Federation would quickly collapse and split for one reason or another. For example, the second heavenly brain disaster. The old general's hand was shaking. She took a deep puff and crushed the remaining cigarette in the ashtray. The other party sent another message. Ajio is going to that plane not only to deal with the heavenly brain, but also to gather luck. The emperor of the secular world didn't seem like much now, but he was someone the heavenly Tao doted on. If she succeeded, the imperial providence that the plane had bestowed upon her would be enough for the Federation to tide over this crisis. Do you understand? Under the eyes and ears of the heavenly axiom, we can't intervene and help her too much, let alone help her personally. The children of the Jiang family are born with the responsibility of shouldering the heavy responsibility of the common people. When I adopted her back then, I saw change and vitality in her. Originally she was a man of few words, But now she was nagging and nagging. Even her cold and aloof tone had become friendly. The old chief felt that the person typing behind the screen had probably changed. You guys sure have a lot of tricks up your sleeves. The people of society can't afford to offend you. MMP. The old chief cursed in her heart. Every time she lamented that the old foxes of the Federation were cunning and treacherous, the group of bald old men would refresh her limits. They were willing to give Jiang Pingji a chance to be the marshal not only because she had the qualifications and was the most suitable candidate, but also because they wanted to take away the supreme authority of the heavenly brain from the ancestors of the Jiang family. They also had their eyes on the emperor's aura that Jiang Pingji had gathered. After the old chief retired, she mingled around for many years. After more contact and understanding, she gradually turned from a firm scientist into a half-religious swindler. She naturally understood how important the emperor's purple aura was. The Federation's move to gain something without risking anything was a sure win. The old chief expressed that she still had a long way to go before she could reach that level. The person talking to the old chief was really someone else. Faced with the old chief's ridicule, the other party didn't go offline or get angry. Instead, she sent a cute smiley face. Since the establishment of the Federation, no one in the world has the Emperor's aura. Xiao Jie was an accident, but it was also a glimmer of hope that the heavens left for the Federation. Some things are not because we elders are heartless, but everyone has their own fate in life. Some roads can only be walked by herself. All Juan and I can do is watch her from behind. She is the son of the Jiang family. She was born extraordinary. She won't be defeated so easily. The old chief looked at the words and sighed as he overturned his previous inference. He originally thought that the ancestors of the Jiang family had a deep hatred for Jiang Pingji and the Federation. Now it seemed that the one who loved her the most was this guy. Have you said these words to her? The other party sent a smiley face. Of course not. I can explain it to her in the future. The old chief thought about Jiang Pingji's temper and replied with a melancholy face. You will be beaten by her. Absolutely. Jiang Pingji had awakened her ancient ability. When she returned to the Federation, her strength would greatly increase. If she was given a few years to develop, even the old chief at his peak would not be able to suppress her in the future. She might even be killed. The hot-tempered Jiang Pingji was really difficult to deal with. Were these unreliable ancestors of the Jiang family not afraid of being punished by the younger generation? The other party sent a cheeky smiley face. Xiao Jie is just a kid. The old chief weighed the age difference between them and was suddenly speechless. In the eyes of these old people, Jiang Pingji was really just a kid. It was like a 3 or 5-year-old kid was angry and wanted to fight to the death with an adult. One day, I will help you pass on this message to Jiang Xiaojie. The old chief smoked another cigarette. He sincerely hoped that one day he could personally witness the scene of Jiang Pingji, knowing everything, and going to settle the score with the two old people. Heh. The cold and simple reply made the old chief know that the person in front of him had changed again. After getting the content she wanted, she turned on the live stream again. Seeing Jiang Pingji bending over the table and working hard, her gaze softened. Jiang Pingji, who was being talked about by various forces, did not disappoint and sneezed loudly. The brush in her hand drew across the paper and almost ruined the whole piece of paper. She rubbed her nose and could not help but tilt her head. She supported her cheek with one hand and muttered, Zixiao must be missing me. The old chief was speechless. Just as she finished talking, footsteps came from outside the house. My lord, there is an urgent message from the front line at Zhanjiang Pass. Jiang Pingji's brush paused. Chapter 1725. Qiguan Rang did have some changes, but it was good news for Jiang Pingji. She handed over the battle at Zhanjiang Pass and Zhongzhao to Qiguan Rang and Sunwen. Jiang Pingji would receive battle reports from Zhanjiang Pass every once in a while. The contents of the battle reports were relatively ordinary. They were routine greetings and reports. They were documents that could be read or not. This time, however, it was an urgent battle report. She knew Qiguan Rang's temperament very well. If it was not a big problem, when Zheng would solve it himself instead of bothering her. Did something happen at the front line? The messenger said, "Don't worry, my lord. It's not a bad thing." Jiang Pingji was slightly impatient. She hated procrastination. Instead of waiting for the messenger to relay the message slowly, she might as well read the secret letter herself. She snatched the secret letter from the messenger and quickly opened it to read it. Her knitted eyebrows gradually relaxed. As expected, when Zheng and Zidao didn't let me down, Jiang Pingji revealed a restrained smile, and her eyes were filled with joy. The messenger said, "The two military counselors ordered me to hand the secret letter to the Lord and wait for the Lord to decide." Jiang Pingji muttered to herself for a while, and sent someone to gather the people near the campsite for a meeting. "This matter is of great importance. I'll have to discuss it with the others before making a decision. Go down and wait. There will be results in half a day." The messenger bowed respectfully and took a few steps back before turning around and leaving the tent. While waiting, Jiang Pingji happened to see a few salted fish complaining that she was dawdling. "Zhao jiao lai gaegu." Although I don't know what happened, based on my years of experience, the streamer must have an idea. If you say that you have already made a decision, you probably won't change it. Then what's the point of calling the others over for a meeting? I've been following the live broadcast room for so many years, but I've never seen the host change her mind. It's usually the people around her who listen to her. What meeting? Isn't it just a routine notice? It's fine if it's once or twice, but if it's like this time, I'm starting to suspect that you're trying to tamper with your live broadcast content. Teppanyaki deo wengu. That makes sense. The results of the meeting have already been decided. What's the point of the meeting? I couldn't help but recall the last time I participated in a design competition. I had spent half a month preparing for it, but the winner of the competition was a relative of the organizer. His opponent's design wasn't anything special. He didn't live up to his title as the champion. Isn't this making fun of us serious contestants? From this point of view, their streamer was pretty bad. Wei Ci and the rest of the angels who seriously gave advice were quite pitiful. Quite a number of salted fishes who didn't have their own opinions were led astray by these people's bullet screen comments. They actually felt that what they said made sense. Jiang Pingji took a glance and casually explained. She did have a decision in her heart, but she did not blindly insist on her decision. If other people's opinions were reasonable, she could change them. However, the truth was that Wei Ci and the rest had a telepathic connection. Most of the time, everyone's decisions were the same. What did this mean? It showed that she was wise and far-sighted. Of course, the wise and far-sighted Jiang Pingji expressed that even if her decision was correct, informing the others and letting them participate in it was basic respect for her subordinates. She also didn't want to give the impression that she was bossy and bossy. In the short term, nothing could be seen, but in the long run, it would definitely leave behind future problems. There aren't many people in this world who are as smart as me. Jiang Pingji spoke very sincerely. Smart people are all reincarnated into my descendants. This hope is too slim. Future generations won't be able to learn my cleverness. Instead, they'll learn my bossy, and they'll be done for. Power and checks and balances are proportional to a certain extent. The more powerful the power, the more it needs external checks and balances. At this moment, no one is on par with me, so I have to restrain myself. In Jiang Pingji's opinion, not to mention the ordinary feudal lords, even the emperor who sat on the throne needed a certain degree of restraint and couldn't be unbridled. When the power in a person's hands was not at all balanced and restrained, it was only a matter of time before it collapsed. Power would give rise to desires. No matter how wise a person was, he couldn't withstand such corrosion. She believed that she wouldn't be influenced by power, but it might not be the case for the future generations. Once the officials got used to the idea that the ruler could do whatever he wanted and be unbridled, if the ruler did something wrong in the future, would these people still have the courage to stand up and correct him? Out of these considerations, Jiang Pingji discussed with the officials and tried to seek common ground while reserving differences. The salted fishes were lectured by her. Countless ellipses appeared on the bullet screen. Finally, an ancient big shot spoke their minds. Guikai guo fengxiao. I understand the logic, but is this your reason for being narcissistic and shameless? I've seen shameless people, but I've never seen someone as shameless as the streamer. Her skin is thicker than the corners of the Great Wall of China. Even missiles can't penetrate it. Jiang Pingji said, "This is called knowing one's own limitations. Everyone should reflect deeply on themselves, understand themselves, and face themselves squarely." After a deep reflection, I have to admit that I'm really King outstanding. The salted fishes were speechless. To defectio. Streamer, take your medicine. Brainless pills aren't expensive. Don't give up on treatment. For a moment, this sentence was repeated by countless salted fishes. They wished they could shake Jiang Pingji awake and make her more normal. Fortunately, Jiang Pingji wasn't invincible. There were still people who could deal with her. When Wei Xi and the others received the news and rushed over, Jiang Pingji, who was still trembling with quick-wittedness, immediately restrained herself and became steady and dignified. I received an urgent summons just now. Did something big happen outside? When Yang Si rushed over, he was gasping for breath and barely managed to speak a coherent sentence. Since most of the people are here, I'll say it. Jiang Pingji looked around and took out the secret letter sent by Qiguan Rang. She said, I just received an urgent report from Wenzheng from Zhanjiang Pass. It's difficult for me to make a decision on my own, so I called everyone here to discuss it together. She asked everyone to pass on the urgent report and read it. Wei Xi and the others still looked calm, but their eyes were wide open. However, the others didn't have enough willpower. Their breathing quickened as they read it. After a long while, an old general stepped forward and cupped his fists. My lord, I think that Zhongzhou is an internal strife, and its fate has come to an end. This is the best time for us to send troops to attack Zhongzhou. Our army has millions of elites. We control Dongqing and Nansheng. If we can take Zhongzhou into our own hands, the world will be ours. Qiguan Rang's battle report was very simple. In general, it said that Zhongzhou had been completely defeated. He also analyzed the general situation within Zhongzhou. In the end, he concluded that if they sent troops to attack Zhongzhou now, it wouldn't be a problem to take 30% of the territory. Zhongzhou was located in the hinterland of the Central Plains. The weather was warm, and there were countless fertile fields. It was definitely the fattest piece of meat. A group of people were itching to try and fight. Their lord had already taken down Nansheng, but they were still at Zhanjiang Pass. The feudal vassals of Zhongzhou were at loggerheads with each other. It was really frustrating. The voices calling for war were too loud. Qiguan Rang and Sun Wen were urged to send troops by many people. They had no choice but to send an urgent report for Jiang Pingji to decide. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.